Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kouri Richins. Eric Richins was born on May 13, 1982, and left a lasting impact on those around him. As a child, Eric was passionate about sports, actively participating in basketball, baseball, and soccer, which showcased his athletic talent and enthusiasm for staying active. Eric's true passion, however, was anything that involved being outdoors. He was an exceptional hunter, known for his impressive marksmanship, and had amassed an impressive collection of trophy animals from around the world. With his vibrant personality, Eric had the ability to light up any room he entered, spreading joy and laughter through his storytelling, playful pranks, and contagious laughter. As an adventure seeker, Eric lived life to the fullest in Utah, where he owned a wide range of motorized vehicles, including trucks, four-wheelers, and snowmobiles. He loved exploring the outdoors and relishing the thrill of adventure. Despite his love for fun and adventure, Eric was deeply committed to his faith, being a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Eric's family supported him on a 2-year mission trip to Mexico City, where he became fluent in Spanish. After high school, he attended the University of Utah, earning a degree in international studies with a minor in Spanish in 2009. While working in construction, Eric frequently visited Home Depot, where he met Kouri Richins. Over time, they developed a friendly connection, and Eric found himself attracted to her charming personality and beauty. However, he was too shy to approach her directly, so Eric asked a friend to help him get her phone number. One day, while Eric was shopping at Home Depot, his friend discreetly asked Kouri for her number, telling her that Eric was interested in getting to know her better. Eric anxiously waited to see if his plan would work. Eric took the next step and called Kouri to set up their first in-person meeting, unaware that it would be a life-changing event. As soon as they met, they clicked, and their first date marked the start of a romantic journey. As they introduced each other to their families, their bond grew stronger. Kouri's family welcomed Eric with open arms, and Eric's family was equally impressed by Kouri's character and how well she fit with him. Although Eric's sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially cautious, they soon warmed up to Kouri and accepted her into their family. In 2013, Eric and Kouri got married in an intimate ceremony, making their relationship official. After their wedding, Kouri gave birth to their first child, Carter, followed by Ashton and then Weston, completing their ideal family. Eric naturally took to being a father, and his boys looked up to him. Eric took great pride in his sons' accomplishments, whether they excelled academically, athletically, or artistically. He consistently showed his support by attending their events and celebrating their successes. Later, Eric established a successful stone masonry business, which flourished due to his exceptional craftsmanship and attention to detail. Clients sought him out for his expertise in creating beautiful stonework. The business provided Eric and his family with financial security. Additionally, Kouri, who worked in real estate, contributed to the family's income. Her entrepreneurial spirit, coupled with her knowledge of the local market, made her a valuable asset. She would buy homes, renovate them, and sell them for a profit. The Richins family enjoyed a wealthy lifestyle, symbolizing the epitome of success. However, their seemingly perfect life came to a sudden end on March 4, 2020, when Kouri called 911 to report that her husband Eric was unresponsive. When paramedics arrived, they determined that Eric had already passed away. Devastated, Kouri called her mother Lisa, who rushed to be by her side. Kouri's brothers, DJ and Ronnie, were present too, overcome with tears and shock. The three of them struggled to come to terms with Eric's passing. Kouri recounted that the evening had begun on a happy note, as they celebrated her latest real estate business milestone, the purchase of a luxurious mansion. Before retiring to bed, Kouri had even prepared Eric's favorite drink, a Moscow Mule, mixing ginger beer with vodka. Kouri went to bed around 9 p.m., but ended up sleeping in her 9-year-old son's room because he was having nightmares. Later, around 3 a.m., she returned to the bedroom she shared with Eric. When she touched him, she was alarmed to find him ice-cold and unresponsive. Despite trying to wake him, she couldn't rouse him and knew something was seriously wrong. As she waited for the paramedics to arrive, Kouri remembered the dispatcher's instructions to perform CPR on Eric, which she claimed to have followed. The paramedics were baffled by Eric's cause of death, speculating that it might have been an aneurysm, given his apparent good health and lack of known medical conditions. However, further investigation revealed that Eric had complained to Kouri about chest pains the night before his death, which initially reinforced the aneurysm theory. But the autopsy results were shocking. Eric's cause of death was ultimately determined to be a lethal dose of fentanyl. Fentanyl is a highly potent pain medication that can be extremely dangerous and even deadly when taken in excessive amounts. After Eric's death, a critical question remained: how did this substance end up in his system? From the start, Kouri and her family quickly blamed Eric's recreational drug use as the reason fentanyl was present. Kouri explained that Eric would take a THC-infused gummy every night to relax, as he preferred THC, the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis, to unwind. However, Kouri, her mother, and brothers had concerns about the origin of these gummies, suspecting that Eric didn't always buy them from trustworthy sources, and instead purchased them illegally. Eric's family strongly disagreed with these claims, believing there was more to the story, and urged investigators to explore other possibilities. Despite trying to move on, Kouri faced significant challenges, according to her brother Ronnie, as the absence of their husband and father left a huge gap in their lives, leading their 3 sons to act out due to the uncertainty surrounding his death. Kouri, grieving and seeking comfort for her children, turned to a creative outlet to cope with her emotions. She wrote and self-published a children's book on Amazon titled Are You With Me?, which aimed to help kids understand and deal with the loss of a loved one. The book tells the story of a young boy struggling to come to terms with his father's death through illustrations and narrative. In the book, Kouri portrayed Eric, her late husband, as a protective angel always watching over their son. Her mother, Lisa, praised the book, saying it brought some comfort to Kouri and her grandchildren as they navigated their emotions and rebuilt their lives. However, detectives investigating Eric's death soon uncovered evidence suggesting foul play. Just weeks after Kouri appeared on local Utah news stations promoting her book and sharing her grief, she was arrested and charged with her husband's murder on May 8, 2023. The community was stunned by the arrest, and the tragic turn of events transformed what was initially a heartwarming story of a grieving wife and mother into an unbelievable tale of betrayal and tragedy. Kouri is accused of murdering Eric by poisoning him. Eric's family believes Kouri deliberately put a lethal dose of fentanyl in the Moscow Mule she made for him on the night he died. However, Kouri's lawyer claims that no fentanyl was found in the glasses at their home. Kouri denies any involvement in Eric's death, saying she had no reason to harm him. Her mother, Lisa, was shocked to hear about her daughter's alleged involvement and told investigators that the couple was happy and had no reason to kill each other. But as detectives dug deeper, they found that Kouri and Eric's relationship was not as perfect as they seemed. The couple had disagreements, and Kouri, who had given up her career to be a stay-at-home mom, wanted to be independent. She was also growing increasingly frustrated with Eric's frequent hunting trips. According to Lisa, Eric was unfaithful in his marriage, and he confided in her about the affair along with Kouri. To address their marital issues, Eric and Kouri sought counseling. However, Eric's family denies that he ever cheated on her. Eric genuinely loved his sons and wanted to save the marriage. Despite his efforts, Eric was preparing for a potential divorce. He set up a secret trust with his sister Katie without revealing his intentions. The investigation uncovered that Eric had 6 life insurance policies worth $3 million. Furthermore, Kouri forged Eric's signature on an additional $100,000 policy just 2 months before his death. It was also discovered that Kouri allegedly stole money from Eric's personal accounts and misused business funds over several years. Contrary to her claims, Kouri's house-flipping business was failing, according to Eric's family representative. Kouri's company was deeply in debt, with millions of dollars owed. According to the spokesperson, Kouri urgently needed cash, and a prenuptial agreement signed before the marriage stated that she would not inherit the business assets if they were to divorce. However, if Eric were to pass away before her during their marriage, the assets would transfer to Kouri. The spokesperson's claims were disputed by Kouri's attorney, who maintained that the business was not in financial trouble. The attorney explained that the debt was a normal part of the house-flipping business, as it relied on lines of credit that would be repaid once the properties were sold. Kouri's attorney clarified that the large debt figure mentioned was simply a result of regular business transactions. Kouri's mother, Lisa, recalled that Eric had been supportive of Kouri's business ventures, particularly when they bought the mansion where they were celebrating on the night of his death. In Heber Valley, Utah, a 10-acre estate with a mansion sat vacant since its construction in 2017, despite being close to popular ski resorts and Deer Creek Reservoir. This prime location offered endless opportunities for outdoor recreation. Kouri, with the help of investors, bought the mansion with plans to renovate and transform it into a recreational hub. Her goal was to sell the property at a significant profit. After consulting an accountant, Kouri and Eric discovered that they could potentially make a $12 million profit from the sale of the property, a substantial return on the initial $3 million investment. However, there's a discrepancy in Eric's involvement. While he seems to be on board with the purchase, his family claims he was against it and had a heated argument with Kouri about buying the mansion. Eric's family spokesperson claims that Kouri gave Eric a drink containing fentanyl on the night of his death, and they believe this was not Kouri's first attempt to harm Eric. They allege that in 2019, during a trip to Greece, Eric became violently ill after Kouri gave him a drink, but Kouri's brother Ronnie denies this, saying Eric was mistakenly given an alcoholic drink by a bartender while taking antibiotics. Eric's family also claims that Kouri tried to kill Eric again on Valentine's Day 2022, a month before his death, when she brought him a sandwich that caused him to break out in hives and struggle to breathe. After Eric's death, Kouri's behavior was questioned, including an incident where she allegedly attacked her sister Amy when she tried to open a safe containing a large amount of cash. Kouri claimed she was defending herself to retrieve important documents, but was charged with assault and pleaded no contest in June 2023. Kouri appeared in court for a 4-hour bail hearing, during which her attorney tried to convince the judge to release her on bail. Prosecutors presented 3 witnesses and evidence to argue that Kouri had poisoned her husband. One of the witnesses, a cell phone expert, testified about Google searches found on Kouri's phone, including queries about retrieving deleted iPhone messages, FBI's ability to find deleted messages, and the lethal dose of fentanyl. However, Kouri's attorney countered that these searches were conducted after her husband's death, as Kouri sought answers to the accusations against her. The prosecution also questioned the lead detective about potential sources Kouri might have used to obtain the drugs that killed Eric. According to the detective, a woman named Carmen Labba, who claimed to work as a cleaner for Kouri's business and home, told investigators about a meeting that took place in early 2022. During a call, Kouri asked Carmen to buy fentanyl pills for an investor with a back injury. Carmen, who had a history of drug-related crimes and was on probation, agreed to the request. She later told detectives that she purchased 15 to 30 fentanyl pills and met with Kouri to exchange them for cash. This exchange happened on February 11, 2022, just 3 days before Valentine's Day. Around the same time, court documents suggest Kouri tried to poison Eric with a sandwich. Carmen also told detectives that Kouri contacted her again looking for even stronger drugs. She said Kouri paid her with a check this time. Specifically, Carmen claimed that Kouri wrote her a check for $1,300 about a week after Eric's death. However, Kouri's attorney questioned whether the check could have been payment for cleaning services instead, and the detective acknowledged that this was possible. Kouri's lawyer tried to discredit Carmen by pointing out her criminal history, including 4 first-degree felonies, and suggesting that she might not be a trustworthy witness. The lawyer claimed that Carmen may have been coerced into saying she sold drugs to avoid a long prison sentence, as the detective allegedly told her she would face serious consequences if she didn't cooperate. The lawyer also asked if there was any physical evidence to prove Carmen had bought drugs. The detective admitted that they found no text messages showing Kouri asking Carmen for drugs, and no witnesses came forward to confirm they had seen the exchange. At the bail hearing, Eric's sister spoke to the judge, expressing her family's distress over Eric's death, and their fear that if Kouri was released on bail, he would cause them further pain. Eric's sister asked the judge to keep Kouri in custody, and the judge accepted her request. Meanwhile, Kouri's family was upset because Kouri was not allowed to leave jail before her trial and would have to stay there. They believed that Kouri's time in jail was affecting her mental and physical health. In 2023, something serious happened to Kouri while she was taking medicine given to her by the jail officials. She had a seizure and was quickly taken to the hospital from the jail. While Kouri was in jail, she claimed that the officials gave her the wrong medication, which caused her to experience adverse effects. Fortunately, she recovered after being treated at a hospital. During her hospital stay, jail officials found a handwritten, unsent letter in her cell. They filed it into court records, claiming it was a note from Kouri to her mother. Prosecutors argued that this letter provided additional evidence of Kouri's intentions and motivations. In November 2023, they requested a no-contact order to restrict Kouri's access to her mother and brothers, mainly due to the letter. Prosecutors claimed that the letter was evidence of witness tampering. According to prosecutors, the letter instructed Kouri's mother on how her brother Ronnie should testify in court. Specifically, Kouri allegedly wanted Ronnie to claim that Eric had admitted to obtaining pain pills containing fentanyl from Mexico during his trip abroad. The letter also instructed Ronnie to obtain text messages from Eric discussing his drug use. Kouri stressed the need to link Eric's Mexico activities to his alleged drug involvement. Despite this, she vehemently denied accusations that a letter was an attempt to tamper with witnesses, claiming it was a work of fiction she wrote as a fantasy story. The judge ruled in her favor, as the prosecution failed to prove witness tampering. Currently, Kouri and Eric's family are fighting for custody of their 3 sons, who are living with one of Eric's relatives. Although Kouri is in jail, she still gets to see her sons through twice-weekly video calls. While her family has not been allowed private visits with the children, they regularly attend their sports events and practices, which are open to the public. If convicted of poisoning her husband Eric with fentanyl, Kouri faces a sentence of 25 years to life. Multiple civil lawsuits have been filed against Kouri, all related to Eric's estate. A central issue in these cases is the custody of Eric's children. Eric's family thinks that Kouri's family is motivated by a desire to control Eric's assets, as whoever gets custody of the children will also gain control of his money. Kouri's trial is scheduled to start in 2025. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Timothy Jones Jr. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser, a divorced couple, had 5 children together, all under the age of 9. Mara Grace, Elias, Xavier, Nathalie, Gabrielle Asher, and Elaine Marie. The family lived in Lexington, South Carolina. When they first met as teenagers, Amber was attracted to Timothy's world and felt a strong connection to him and his way of life. They got married young, and while Timothy pursued his education in Mississippi, Amber dedicated herself to being a homemaker. Timothy grew up with a mother who struggled with schizophrenia, which gradually worsened over time. She eventually needed constant care. When Timothy's father was just 20 years old, he took Timothy to live with his grandmother. There, Timothy was exposed to a troubled environment marked by domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcoholism. Despite a tough upbringing, Timothy displayed a natural aptitude for numbers, effortlessly solving math problems, and disassembling and reassembling computers with ease. However, his life took a dramatic turn when he entered adolescence and began experiencing auditory hallucinations. At the age of 10, Timothy started using drugs and drinking excessively, and at 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. This injury affected his frontal lobe, the area of the brain responsible for regulating impulses, which is also linked to psychopathic tendencies. Following the accident, Timothy's behavior became increasingly erratic and stubborn. He grew intensely jealous of his father, feeling threatened by anyone who had a relationship with him, believing they were taking away his father's attention. Over time, Timothy became convinced that his father didn't love him and harbored a deep-seated fear of abandonment. After completing high school, Timothy aspired to join the elite U.S. Navy SEALs, but he lacked the required athletic talent and discipline, leading to his eventual expulsion from the training program due to substance abuse. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to a year in a labor camp at an Illinois state prison. When he was released, he appeared to have undergone a significant transformation, with religion becoming a central guiding force in his life. At an amusement park in Chicago, he met Amber, the woman who would become the mother of his children, and they quickly decided to get married, in accordance with the rigid expectations of Timothy's Pentecostal church. At the time of their marriage, Amber was 19 years old, and Timothy was 22. Soon after, Amber became aware of the church's strict rules, which prohibited women from cutting their hair, wearing pants, makeup, or jewelry. Timothy believed in the principle that women should submit to their husbands and have many children. Timothy was a devout individual who dedicated his life to the church. Despite many people warning him against taking the Bible too literally, he remained committed to his faith. He and his spouse had 3 children in quick succession: Mara, Elias, and Nathan, each born a year apart. As their family grew, they relocated to Mississippi, where Timothy earned a degree in computer science and engineering from the state university with highest honors. Throughout this period, Timothy Jones Jr. successfully balanced his marital life, parenthood, and various jobs. His family was incredibly proud of him, recognizing Timothy as a remarkable genius with a bright future. Timothy's life seemed to be progressing smoothly. He secured a job at Intel as a computer chip manufacturer, which his wife Amber saw as a means to a better life. Having lived in student housing in Mississippi, they aspired to raise their 3 children in a larger house and even considered hiring a nanny. Timothy's dream of living on a farm led him to buy a rundown trailer on a dirt road in Red Bank. He purchased animals to raise, and Amber stayed at home to care for the kids and the animals. The problem was that Amber was isolated, with no car and no driving skills in this rural area. By 2012, they had 2 more children, and problems started to surface. Timothy questioned whether he was the father of their youngest daughter, Elaine. He also wanted Amber to homeschool the kids. Despite her limited education, she only finished high school. Amber, who already felt lonely with no nearby family and her husband's family living far away in Mississippi, felt even more inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions rose when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with their neighbor. Their marriage began to fall apart, and they considered getting a divorce. Timothy wanted sole custody of the children, so he visited a therapist and asked for a statement to give to his divorce lawyer, claiming he was capable of raising the children on his own. Amber, who didn't have a lawyer and was unsure of what to do, eventually decided it would be best for the children to stay with their father. As she was unemployed, and lacked education. As the primary breadwinner, Timothy was granted full custody, and Amber was allowed to visit the children regularly. She left her husband and children behind. However, Timothy's mental state began to deteriorate. Haunted by his failed marriage, he started using drugs and drinking again, struggling with the voices in his head. He became easily provoked over minor issues, and Amber reported that he had once beaten her in front of their children until she lost consciousness. As Timothy struggled to balance work and taking care of the children, he hired a nanny service despite his own instability. The first 2 nannies observed that his home was spotless, and he was dedicated and attentive to his children. Later, he switched services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter of her own. Timothy soon began an affair with the nanny and attempted to convert her to his religion, insisting she adopt the church's customs, such as wearing long dresses, growing her hair out, and submitting to his authority. When Crystal refused, their relationship began to fall apart. Crystal later stated that Timothy was extremely harsh towards his children, making them stand on their toes for hours, because he believed punishment was necessary to purify their sick bodies. She left after catching him trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal's departure, Timothy hired another nanny who noticed a significant change in him. His previously clean home was now filthy, filled with trash, dirty clothes, and infested with cockroaches. Over time, Timothy Jones Jr. became increasingly violent, punishing his children daily. He started feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day, limiting them to 1 meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina's social services to report the neglect and abuse in Timothy's home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children suffered. The abuse was so severe that the teachers at the elementary school, attended by the older children, had previously reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had required Jones to sign a written promise never to mistreat or hit his children again, as they often arrived at school with bruises. On the afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up his 3 older children from elementary school and his 2 younger ones from the nanny around 7 p.m. Timothy became enraged about some broken outlets in their mobile home. He questioned his 6-year-old son Nathan about the damage, and when Nathan denied any involvement, Timothy forced Nathan to do push-ups, squats, and other exercises repeatedly, while whipping him with a belt whenever he slowed down. Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, called to talk to her kids. During the call, Nathan told his mom about the punishment he got for breaking some outlets, saying it was an accident. Timothy got angry, ended the call, and told Amber to stop protecting Nathan. After hours of being punished, Nathan was extremely tired, dehydrated, and begging for it to stop. He passed out, and Timothy carried him to bed, leaving him alone without water or any help. Phone records show that Amber tried to call back 8 more times, but Timothy didn't answer. Around 1 a.m., Timothy searched for a specific scene from the movie American History on YouTube, even though he knew Nathan was already unconscious. At around 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter Mia to a local store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. When they got back home, Timothy grabbed Mia and started choking her. Then he went to his 7-year-old son Elias and did the same thing. After that, he took off his belt and went to his 2-year-old son Gabriel and 1-year-old daughter Elaine, putting the belt around their necks and pulling until they stopped breathing. Seeing that the kids weren't moving, Timothy took their sheets and blankets, wrapped each of them separately, and put them in the back seat of his car. On Friday, August 29th, Jones's father called him at 7:43 a.m., but got no response. Later, at 9:36 a.m., the nanny tried calling Jones and finally got through to him on her second attempt. She asked if he would be taking the younger kids to daycare, and he told her not to worry, saying he would take them the following week, explaining that they were currently out of town and would return by Tuesday. Between noon and 2 p.m. that day, Jones drove around, searching online for out-of-state drugs. At 1:27 p.m., he was near Alabama, but he ignored his grandmother's multiple calls, totaling 23 attempts between 3 and 5 p.m. During this time, Jones also searched online for tobacco shops in Alabama and Mississippi, as well as campsites in South Carolina. His location was recorded in Georgia at 8:04 p.m. The next day, August 30th, his grandmother continued sending messages, asking why he wasn't responding to her calls. Then, on August 31st, his phone's location was recorded in Red Bank, New Jersey, at 10:08 a.m. Jones spent the day searching the internet for camping stores, RV parks, and landfills in South Carolina, as well as animal services. He also looked up 2 songs at 4:54 p.m. Timothy Jones Jr. received a reminder from the nanny to bring diapers when he dropped off Gabriel. An hour later, he responded, informing her that he had left South Carolina with the children to start anew, and asking her to clean the mobile home, giving her permission to take whatever she wanted from the belongings he left behind. On September 1st, Timothy was driving from one place to another. The next morning, at 10:35, he searched online for information on disposing of bodies in landfills, making muriatic acid, and camping near countries with no extradition laws, as he was facing legal issues and considering his escape options. Throughout the day, he received updates from the nanny, who had cleaned the mobile home. His boss at Intel also messaged him, inquiring about his work attendance, around 6 p.m. On the morning of September 3rd, a coworker called him twice, but Timothy did not respond. Later, surveillance video captured Timothy at a well-known store, purchasing a saw, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles at 3:37 a.m. He also searched online for information about his missing children. On September 4th at 6:33 a.m., Timothy Jones Jr.'s location was tracked to Charleston, South Carolina, where he deposited a check for $3,508 at a bank. The next day, on September 5th, his phone was briefly turned on in Louisville, Georgia, but his exact location was not recorded. On the morning of September 6th, Jones placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags and abandoned them in a clearing along a rural forest road in Alabama, which was recorded at 9:14 a.m. The bodies had been in the back seat of his vehicle since August 29th. Later that day, at around 7 p.m., Jones was stopped at a traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. A police officer approached his vehicle and noticed a strong, unpleasant smell coming from inside, as well as apparent bleach stains on the carpet that suggested a recent cleaning attempt. When questioned about the whereabouts of his children, Jones initially denied having any children, then claimed he had 3 children who were in South Carolina. The officers asked for the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety, and after making the calls, they promptly arrested Jones. Jones felt overwhelmed with sorrow and anger when he caught one of his sons playing with an electrical outlet. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him until he lost consciousness. Later, he used a belt to discipline his other son, as his hands were too large to fit around the boy's neck. When his eldest daughter walked into the room and saw what was happening, Jones grabbed her and choked her with his hands until her face turned purple. After the incident, Jones put his son Nathan to bed, only to discover him dead when he checked on him later. During the investigation, Jones explained that he killed his children because he heard voices in his head, leading him to believe they were plotting against him. He also thought that they would be better off in heaven. During his attempted escape, Jones drove through the southeast with the bodies of his 5 children hidden under blankets in his car. He eventually dumped their bodies in a remote Alabama forest before being arrested by chance during a routine traffic stop in Mississippi. Timothy claimed it was an accident and said the punishment he imposed on Nathan went too far, leading to the boy's death from exhaustion caused by the strenuous exercises. When he found Nathan lifeless in his room, Timothy was overcome with panic and decided to kill all his children. The pathologist found it difficult to determine the exact cause of Nathan's death, but suggested that the excessive exercise had weakened him so much that it would have taken minimal force to end his life. The investigators were puzzled as to why Timothy didn't call for emergency services if he genuinely believed it was an accident. Instead, he attempted to hide and dispose of the children's bodies on the same day. Timothy eventually agreed to take the investigators to the location where he had hidden the bodies. On September 11th, authorities recovered the remains of Timothy Jones's 5 children. The evidence collected from his car was handed over to South Carolina authorities and included personal items such as family photos, children's clothing, drawings by the children, letters written by their mother to the children, Timothy Jones's university diploma, and his passport. Additionally, handwritten notes by Jones were found, detailing to-do lists that included instructions on how to dispose of bodies, including grinding bones into powder or small pieces, and burning them. The lists also mentioned supplies needed, such as camping gear, gasoline, and muriatic acid. Upon his arrest on September 13, 2014, Jones was placed in a special isolation cell, away from the general prison population. Since then, he has undergone evaluation by various mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. Although the experts' opinions differ, some have diagnosed Jones with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or personality disorder. These experts suggest that Jones's mental state at the time of the crime might have been exacerbated by his drug use and a traumatic brain injury he suffered at the age of 15, which could have contributed to an underlying psychotic condition. In late May 2019, Timothy Jones Jr. was tried for a crime considered one of the worst murders in South Carolina's history. The trial featured weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presented against him. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a verdict on June 13, 2019, sentencing Jones Jr. to death. Currently, he is being held in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, where he wears a green jumpsuit that distinguishes him as a death row inmate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marta del Castillo. Marta del Castillo was born on June 19, 1991, in Seville, Spain, to Eva Casanova and Antonio del Castillo. At 17, her life took a devastating turn. On January 24, 2009, Marta was chatting with her best friend, Sylvia Fernandez, when she abruptly ended the conversation, telling her she had to leave in a hurry because her boyfriend Miguel Carcano was waiting downstairs. She promised to fill her friend in on everything when she returned, saying she needed to clarify some issues in their relationship. In the hallway, Marta encountered her father, who cautioned her against getting on Miguel's motorcycle, but she simply kissed him on the cheek and left. At 5:30 p.m., Marta departed, and as the hours ticked by with no sign of her, her family grew increasingly worried. Her mother began calling acquaintances who might know something about Marta's whereabouts, including Carcano. Everyone seemed to think she was with Miguel, but when he failed to answer their calls, Marta's father decided to visit the boy's house. He rang the doorbell repeatedly, but no one responded. It wasn't until they managed to contact Samuel Benitez, a close friend of Miguel's, that they learned Marta had been dropped off at his house around midnight. This struck Marta's mother as suspicious, given the time was only 11:45. At 2 a.m., Marta's family reported her disappearance, but they had no idea it would become one of the most sensational cases in the country's history. 4 hours later, the police disclosed that Marta's boyfriend, Miguel Carcano, was already a suspect. At 1:30 p.m., a third report was filed, but the police failed to act, leaving the family increasingly frustrated. It wasn't until 17 hours after the initial request for help, as stipulated by protocol, that the officers finally began searching for Marta. In the days that followed, the family took it upon themselves to gather statements from relatives and friends of the young girl. On January 27, 2009, the family held their first press conference, simultaneously launching a campaign to find Marta. The next day, approximately 2,000 people protested in Seville, demanding the young girl's safe return under the rallying cry, "We are all Marta." Another demonstration was convened on February 7th, drawing around 3,000 people. The case continued to captivate the nation, dominating television and newspaper headlines. After 21 days of searching, the police finally located Miguel Carcano on February 13th. The 20-year-old took full responsibility for the case, confessing that he had murdered Marta and dumped her body into the Guave River near his apartment. He also revealed a crucial detail: he did not act alone. He identified Samuel Benitez as one of his accomplices, claiming Benitez had helped dispose of the body. Benitez accepted culpability. Later, Miguel implicated Javier Garcia Marin, a troubled miner known as El Cuco, and Francisco Delgado, his brother, as well as his girlfriend Maria Garcia, as co-conspirators. All five were arrested. The subsequent interrogations yielded a wave of contradictions, while a thorough search for Marta's body in the river was simultaneously launched. On February 16th, Carcano repeated his statement before a judge, in contrast to his friend Samuel, who distanced himself from the case, denying any involvement in Marta's murder and attributing his earlier confession to police pressure on March 18th. Miguel Carcano requested to revise his statement, altering his account of events. He claimed that he and El Cuco had assaulted Marta at knife point, after which the miner strangled her. They then transported her body to Delgado's house and subsequently disposed of it in a garbage container. In response to these declarations, the judge ordered the search efforts in the Guave River to be suspended and redirected the investigation to a landfill. Marta's father pointed the finger at Delgado's girlfriend, as her father worked at a biological waste crematorium, suggesting that the body might have been incinerated. This theory gained significant media attention, but the police pressed on with their search. On November 16, 2009, Miguel's preventive detention term ended, and he was moved to a supervised flat to await trial. In February 2011, he faced retrial on charges of abuse and murder. Although he was cleared of these charges due to lack of sufficient evidence, he received a 2-year and 11-month sentence in a juvenile detention center for concealing Carcano's crimes. On October 17, 2011, the trial of the 4 adult defendants finally began. During the trial, Miguel Carcano provided new details about Marta's murder, stating he had struck her with an ashtray during a heated argument, which led to her death. He revealed that his previous statements about abusing her were false. His brother, his brother's girlfriend, and Benitez maintained their innocence, claiming they knew nothing about Marta's body, and that Carcano fabricated stories to shift the blame. By November 22, 2011, forensic police had confirmed the presence of Marta's blood on Miguel's jacket, and a mix of Miguel's and Maria Garcia's genetic profiles on a roll of fabric tape, a cord, and an extension cable believed to have been used to strangle Marta. This evidence contradicted Maria Garcia's alibi, as she had insisted she was only at the crime scene in the early morning and was unaware of the incident. The discovery of her lie led to accusations of desecrating the body and cover-up. Furthermore, the police identified up to 5 fingerprints on 3 alcohol bottles, including one belonging to El Cuco. Benitez was the only suspect against whom no evidence was found. By this point, the 5 youths were under intense public scrutiny. The initial trials took place with a significant police presence, and the prosecution sought prison sentences for Carcano, Benitez, Delgado, and Garcia, relying on a total of 90 witnesses, including national police officers and experts, 30,000 pH monitorings, crime scene photographs, DNA evidence collected by the forensic police, and items discovered at the Leon 13 residence. The trials sparked a public outcry, with people pressing against the police cordon, demanding to see Marta's body. Delgado and his girlfriend emerged, shrouded in Bacchus and sunglasses, but they couldn't evade the crowd. A woman confronted them, hurling insults, while others tried to rip off their sunglasses, pushing them to expose their faces to the throng. During the trial, El Cuco's mother granted an interview, her face obscured. She vehemently maintained her son's innocence, claiming neither she nor he had any knowledge of Marta's whereabouts. Journalists' skepticism was palpable, labeling her a liar, but she remained unfazed. She received a considerable sum of €10,000 for the interview. A few days later, Marta's family petitioned for the earnings to be regulated and the money to be used to face her son's impending sentence. A key witness, a taxi driver, testified that he drove Delgado on the night of the crime. Shaken by a colleague's recent murder, he remembered a bald, bearded man who stared at him intensely and was dropped off at Leon 13th Street, the crime scene, for €8. However, the defense argued the fare should have been €5, not €8, questioning the driver's credibility. Marta's parents testified, describing the deep pain and suffering they were experiencing as a result of the situation. They had been forced to give up their jobs, seek psychiatric help, and even struggle with depression. Marta's sisters, their other two daughters, were also going through a very difficult time. The whole family just wanted the ordeal to come to an end. The jury's verdict in 2012 disappointed the family. Carcano got a 21-year, 3-month sentence for the girl's murder. He was banned from the city for 30 years and ordered to pay €280,000 to her parents and €30,000 to each sister for moral damage. 3 individuals, Delgado, Maria Garcia, and Sanel Benitez, were released from custody due to lack of evidence linking them to the crime scene at the time of the murder. The following year, Delgado and Benitez took action against Marta's family, demanding they cover the trial costs. In response, Marta's father vowed to pursue justice beyond Spain's borders, criticizing the country's justice system as outdated. He even threatened to take his case to Strasbourg, home to the European Parliament and the European Court of Human Rights. In December 2011, Marta's mother penned a heartfelt letter to Carcano, who was incarcerated at the time, pleading with him to end the anguish of not knowing the whereabouts of her daughter's body. She yearned for Marta to rest in peace in a place where she could visit, bring flowers, and converse with her. However, Carcano never responded to the letter. On January 24, 2012, 3 years after Marta's disappearance, widespread demonstrations erupted in cities and towns across Spain, demanding justice for the young girl. Incarcerated and facing threats from fellow inmates, Carcano later attempted to take his own life. As a result, he was transferred to a therapeutic unit, where he was denied visitation rights and phone privileges. The murderer was extremely active during his imprisonment, concocting as many as 7 different accounts of the crime, which led to several lawyers abandoning his defense. In his 2013 testimony, he implicated someone close to him as the perpetrator. Carcano claimed an argument erupted between him and his brother over the mortgage on their house at Leon 13. Before that, he wrote a letter to his family expressing his desire to stop covering for Delgado. According to this latest testimony, a dispute arose over a fraudulent loan, and the conversation escalated to the point where Delgado allegedly threatened his brother with a weapon. When Marta intervened, she supposedly received a fatal blow from the butt of Delgado's gun. Delgado then made a call, but Miguel claims he doesn't know who it was to or what was discussed. However, he remembers fleeing the house, leaving Marta lifeless in the room. At this point, El Cuco arrived, and Miguel requested his help to dispose of the body using a wheelchair. They transported the body to the Mahala farm in Lanada and buried it there. Marta's parents believed Carcano's story and respected him, despite the suspicious events that had unfolded. They asked for the investigation to be reopened, with a focus on Miguel's brother. However, the prosecution and the judge did not take the statements seriously. Marta's father decided to visit Carcano in prison, asking him to cooperate. He told Carcano that he had bought the house at Leon 13 and promised that it would be his once he was released if he helped find Marta's body. The search for Marta's body was one of the most expensive in the country's history, covering both land and sea. The initial search took place in the Guadalquivir River. However, when agents tried to recreate the events, several inconsistencies appeared. It became clear that it was impossible for the three individuals, Carano, El Cuco, and Benitez, to transport the body together on a motorcycle, especially since they would have had to carry Marta's body. During the reenactment, the body fell to the ground as soon as the motorcycle started moving. After Carano made the claim that Marta's body had been dumped in a trash bin, a massive search operation was launched at the city's main landfill. Due to the significant time that had passed since Marta's disappearance, and the enormous amount of waste the landfill received daily, the search team estimated they would need to sift through around 40,000 tons of garbage to find any evidence. The search effort lasted 32 days, but was unsuccessful, mainly because Carano kept changing his story, providing up to 4 different locations where he claimed the body was buried, prompting new searches each time. Search paused due to lack of funds during Interior Minister Alfredo Perez's tenure. In 2013, Carano accused his brother of Marta's murder, providing a new location. Despite damaged credibility, a new search was launched. Carano guided police to the area, but failed to provide precise directions. Police excavated 6 farms, scanning 10,000 square meters, but found no evidence. All the searches were in vain, and at the request of the parents, the search for the body was halted on 2015. The public ministry asked the defendants to jointly compensate the Ministry of the Interior with a sum of $666,329. Oscar presented himself to Roselia, Marta's mother, as a criminal, but in reality, he was an infiltrator seeking a confession. Over time, they began to meet frequently, and Roselia trusted him with the keys to her house. Oscar recorded 600 hours of conversation between Roselia and her surroundings. In October 2011, El Cuco was already granted release permits from the juvenile center to which he had been sent for covering up for Carano. During a conversation, Oscar asked the young man if he thought the police were following him, to which El Cuco responded affirmatively, asserting they would do so to find out where they got rid of Marta. This statement forever incriminated him. After finishing talking, El Cuco immediately realized what he had said and quickly rectified, asserting he hadn't done anything, while Oscar played along as if he hadn't noticed. In other tapes, El Cuco mocked the police's efforts to find the body, and Roselia discussed how inept the investigators had been for not auditing the calls from her mobile phone. Despite the hard work of the man, those 600 hours of recordings were never judicialized. Only in 2022, 13 years after Marta's disappearance, did the infiltrators' work yield results. On May 26, 2022, dozens of people, especially neighbors of Marta's family, gathered at the courthouse doors wanting to accompany them due to the celebration of the new judicial process. Roselia and El Cuco arrived at the courthouse shielded by the police, with the young man being entirely covered, wearing a large hoodie, a balaclava, sunglasses, and even gloves, while Roselia was wearing sunglasses, a mask, and a headscarf. In 2011, El Cuco declared that he had not been in the flat on Lyon 13th Street where the crime occurred, but with several friends. He said he had gone home at 11:30 at night and had met his mother's partner, who had gone out to throw out the garbage, then had gone up to his house and had not left for the rest of the night. Roselia, for her part, said she had gone out with her partner for drinks around 11:30 at night and had returned home around 1:30 in the morning on January 25th, finding her son asleep there. El Cuco confessed that on the night of January 24th, Carano called him after having murdered Marta and asked him for help to bury her body. Along with Benitez, they took his mother's car and went to Lyon 13, where Delgado was also found. Meanwhile, Roselia was at the bar and stayed there until 4:30 in the morning when she got home, and her son was still missing. Both El Cuco and his mother were charged with perjury, the ACT aggravated by having obstructed the judicial procedure ongoing since 2009. Both El Cuco and Rosalia accepted responsibility for their acts. The trial was held, and the judge suspended all scheduled witness statements, leaving Marta's parents distressed as they had called Carcano to testify in hopes he would finally reveal their daughter's whereabouts. On June 9, 2022, both El Cuco and Rosalia were sentenced to 2 and 2 years in prison, and the judge also imposed a fine of €11,440 each and a civil liability payment of €30,000 to Marta's parents. However, they didn't care about the money. They still wanted just one thing: to find the body of their daughter. That same year, the investigative judge authorized the expert to access the mobile phones of Carcano and Marta. However, he did not grant permission to do the same with the rest of the individuals involved in the case, as there currently is no evidence against them. Carcano consented to his phone being examined, insisting they would find evidence pointing to his brother as the actual murderer. Yet the main goal was to determine the location of the long-sought body. Although looking for new leads in the criminal case was prohibited, the expert never submitted his findings, and thus the case was closed indefinitely in November 2022. 13 years after Marta's murder, the civil court decided to close the separate investigation for the search of the body, deeming the legally stipulated investigation period as expired without any new significant discoveries. Marta's parents came to terms with the fact that Carcano would never reveal the location of their daughter's body and decided to sell the flat where the crime occurred. Marta's case will join countless other unresolved cases worldwide, with documents gathering dust on a desk. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicholas Billingham. Fiona Beale and Nicholas Billingham were together for 17 years, with their fair share of ups and downs like any other couple. Although their case was closed 2 weeks ago, many details are likely to emerge later. Here's what I've learned about their relationship so far. Leslie Oldham, who knew the couple well, described them as follows. "I found Fiona to be really nice," Leslie recalled. "Although they didn't exhibit overt displays of affection, they seemed happy enough. Nicholas brought her over for a cup of tea, and she was polite and chatty." Nicholas had a reputation as a ladies' man, which made it difficult to predict how long his relationships would last. Fiona and Nicholas's relationship ended in November 2021. After splitting up with Fiona Beale, Nicholas Billingham remained in contact with his friends and family. He sent a text to his mother, informing her that he had run off with a woman named Faye, and claimed to be thrilled with his new life. Fiona took 10 days to recover from the breakup, and when she finally felt better, she returned to work. Her colleagues, who had heard about the split, offered her many words of encouragement upon her return. However, the breakup with Nicholas had a lasting impact on her, and it was noticeable to many. By the end of February 2022, nearly 4 months after the breakup, Fiona's mental health began to decline. She found it difficult to continue living in a house that held so many memories of Nicholas, so she made the decision to move to Cumbria, a location roughly 200 miles from Northampton. Fiona started planning her next moves after her husband went to bed. She couldn't sleep in the same bed as him due to her loud breathing, restlessness, or snoring. In another notebook entry, she mentioned that Nicholas had been mean and cruel to her for 17 years, but it was his vile behavior at Halloween that made her decide she couldn't let him get away with it anymore. Nicholas Billingham disappeared on November 1st, 2021, and from that moment, he kept in touch with his family and friends only through text messages. The day after the police officers read Fiona Beale's notebook, they visited the house on Moore Street, where she lived with Nicholas. Upon examination, they found nothing suspicious. However, when they returned the following day, they discovered some telling signs, including a blood-stained mattress in the cellar. On March 19th, the police went back to Moore Street and uncovered more evidence. With the help of forensic officers, specialist search teams, and a cadaver dog, they found a buried body in the rear garden. The remains of Billingham were discovered wrapped in carpet, buried beneath a layer of bark chippings, soil, wooden sheeting, concrete building blocks, bricks, and planks. Additionally, plastic bags, rubble, mortar, polystyrene, laminate flooring, and sections of fabric and vinyl were found in a constructed hideaway covering the body. A sleep mask covered the victim's eyes, with the phrase, "This is my morning after face," printed on the inside. The police spokesman described the body as being wrapped in cables, hose pipes, and plastic bags, surrounded by building debris, saying it showed a complete lack of dignity in death and utter contempt. A post-mortem examination took place the day after the body was found. The results revealed that the victim died from a single stab wound to the right side of the neck, which severed the right jugular vein and cut through the esophagus and trachea. This would have required moderate force, although it is possible that more severe force was used. On March 22, 2022, police arrested Fiona Beale and charged her with the murder of Nicholas Billingham. Nicholas's family was devastated by his death and shocked to discover that Fiona had used his phone to send texts to them and his friends. Nicholas's mother, Yvonne Valentine, shared a message with journalists. In a statement, Nicholas's family expressed their grief, saying they lost Nicholas too soon and that he will always be in their hearts. They have been overwhelmed with kind support and comforting words from many people and are aware that Nicholas will be deeply missed by his friends, family, and loved ones. Nicholas's family is heartbroken, remembering him as a lovely boy who grew into a proud young man, leaving them with cherished memories. Fiona Beale's colleagues and the parents of her students were stunned to discover that the respected teacher had a hidden, darker side. The school administration, where Fiona worked, released a statement expressing shock and sadness upon learning that one of their teaching staff members was charged with a serious offense and is now in custody. They are particularly concerned about the impact this news will have on the students and are committed to supporting both pupils and staff during this difficult time. This tragedy will have a profound effect on the school community, and it's during such times that they must come together, support each other, and show kindness to one another. When the police investigated, they discovered that Nicholas had died on November 1st, 2021. In the days that followed, Fiona attempted to cover her tracks. She had meticulously planned her actions. Fiona was aware that if she claimed to have contracted the virus, she would have a 10-day window during which she would be left alone. It is suspected that she falsified test results to complete an online form. There is no evidence to suggest that Fiona ever took the test. Her activities during those 10 days were inconsistent with the debilitating symptoms she claimed to be experiencing. Following the murder, Fiona began cleaning up as early as 10:07 a.m. on November 2nd. Using her dead partner's Amazon account, and then her own, she purchased multiple cleaning products, including items for Venetian blinds, a new mop and bucket, heavy-duty bin bags, a new mattress, bedding, clothing, wall art, and mirrors. On the same day, she modified a Tesco order containing cleaning products to add 3 rolls of duct tape. At 2:19 p.m., she bought heavy-duty long gardening gloves, a stainless steel digging spade, and a galvanized incinerator bin. Additionally, she made multiple purchases to dispose of the body and acquired items for her own comfort and indulgence, such as chocolates, scented candles, toiletries, soft furnishings, and clothing. Nearly 2 weeks after killing Nicholas, Fiona went on a shopping trip. On November 13th, supermarket security cameras recorded her buying various items, including building materials, which she later used to construct a grave. The police later released this CCTV footage. As previously mentioned, Fiona pretended to be Nicholas by sending texts to his family and friends for several months. She even invited Nicholas's mother to visit her. Miss Valentine recounted how Fiona invited her to her home for a Christmas drink on December 23, 2021, while Nicholas's body lay buried in the backyard. Fiona went about her daily routine, showing no signs of depression or trauma. In fact, the evidence suggested the opposite. After murdering her unwanted partner, who she suspected was having an affair, she was embracing what she referred to in a deleted file as a new life. During the trial, Fiona Beale initially pleaded not guilty, but later confessed to taking Nicholas's life, claiming it was an involuntary act. However, the prosecutor disagreed. He presented evidence that Nicholas Billingham had been unfaithful to Fiona with multiple women during their 17-year relationship. Although Nicholas had left Fiona on several occasions, he always returned to her, and she took him back. One of his infidelities resulted in a child being born. Instead of leaving him, Fiona meticulously planned his murder, deciding when and how to kill him, where to hide his body, and how to cover her tracks. She even prepared an alibi for her absence from work on the day of the murder. Defense attorney Andrew Wheeler presented a statement to the jury following the prosecution's opening argument, stating that Fiona had struggled with mental health issues for years prior to the killing due to Mr. Billingham's controlling behavior. Wheeler emphasized that the case was not as straightforward as the prosecution claimed, highlighting Fiona's good character and reputation as a 49-year-old school teacher. Wheeler acknowledged that Fiona unlawfully killed Nicholas Billingham, but emphasized that the case revolves around her mental state at the time. He argued that Billingham's psychologically dominant behavior had worn Fiona down over the years, breaking her spirit. The court was informed that Fiona Beale has no clear recollection of the actual event. After visiting London, Fiona continued to send messages to the head teacher, claiming she was ill. In March, the concerned head teacher reached out to Fiona's mother, who revealed that Fiona had told her she was going on a school residential trip. The head teacher then notified the police, reporting Fiona as missing. The Cumbrian police traced Fiona to a rented address near Kendal, but she insisted she just wanted some peace and quiet, and did not want her family to know her exact location. The officer relayed this message to Fiona's mother, but 3 days later, the authorities returned to the lodge after Fiona sent her family a message apologizing and expressing her love for them. Eventually, Fiona Beale altered her initial statement and fully acknowledged her guilt. At Northampton Crown Court, she shared details about her personal life and career with the jury, claiming that Billingham had twice thrown a dinner plate against a wall due to their disagreements over cleanliness. Fiona recalled her university days, during which she was prescribed antidepressants. She described her partner Billingham as caring and attentive initially, but changing gradually over time. At the start of their relationship, Fiona had accidentally left a cloth with cleaner on it, which stained a worktop. Although it didn't seem serious at first, cleaning became a major issue throughout the years. Instead of laughing it off, Fiona would get scolded. When having meals together, Fiona explained that everything had to be exactly as Billingham wanted it. She couldn't pinpoint when this behavior started, but it worsened over time and continued until the end. Even the way items were placed in cupboards was strictly regulated, with everything facing outwards. Fiona claimed that Billingham threw plates of dinner at the wall on a couple of occasions, which made her lose confidence. She mentioned that his behavior started as joking about her not doing something, but eventually turned nasty. Before taking his life, Fiona told Billingham that she would kill him to prevent him from hurting another woman the way he had hurt her. She later accused him of lying to his own family to protect himself, prioritizing his own self-preservation and attempting to show her in a bad light. Nicholas left behind 2 beautiful children who will never have the opportunity to see or talk to their father again. They'll never be able to invite him to special events, have him attend their weddings, teach them to drive, or simply spend time with him. You've taken all of that away from them. Fiona received a prison sentence of 20 years. Speaking after the guilty plea, Nicholas's mother, Yvonne, expressed her outrage and pain, saying it was unbearable to know that her son's killer had offered her a drink while his body lay buried just a few feet away. She struggled to comprehend how someone could harbor such hatred to commit such a heinous act. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Johnny Berry. Johnny Berry was born on August 26, 1983, and grew up to be a happy and friendly person with a large social circle and a love for parties. During her school days, she was an active member of the local cheerleading team. After completing high school, Johnny enrolled at East Tennessee State University to pursue a degree in psychology and criminology. It was during this period that she met Jason White, and they began dating. The couple got engaged just before graduating in late 2004. At the age of 21, Johnny decided to pursue a master's degree in psychology, which led her to temporarily relocate to Knoxville for her studies. While in Knoxville, she worked part-time at a children's educational center, where she discovered her passion for helping kids. Meanwhile, Johnny's fiancé, Jason, was studying law in a different state. Despite the distance, they remained close and began planning their wedding in Knoxville. Initially, Johnny stayed with her friend Jason Amami, who had also attended college with her and later moved to Knoxville. They shared a 2-bedroom apartment, and Jason allowed Johnny to stay there until she found her own place to live. Johnny had 2 part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and the other at a children's hospital. On the Sunday night of December 5th, after finishing her shift at the jewelry store, Johnny went to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. Later, she returned home and spent her evening wrapping presents for the children at the educational center, chatting with her neighbor, and then retreating to her room. Before going to bed, she had a phone conversation with her boyfriend. Around 4 in the morning, Jason Amami was awoken by a scream from a woman. At first, he thought Johnny was having a nightmare, so he went to her room to check on her. However, he was shocked to find a stranger wielding a knife. The intruder attacked Jason, and they engaged in a fierce struggle. Eventually, Jason managed to fend off the attacker and made a dash for the door. He rushed out of the apartment and ran to the nearest convenience store, almost a kilometer away, to call for help. When the store clerk saw Jason, who was covered in blood, they immediately called 911. Jason explained to the police what had happened when they arrived at the scene. At their apartment, the police found Johnny lying in the hallway that connected 5 apartments. She was still alive, but barely conscious. When the police questioned her about the attacker, she could only provide weak clues. The police searched the entire building and the surrounding area, but were unable to find the attacker. They rushed Johnny to the nearest hospital, where despite the doctor's best efforts, they were unable to save her. The doctor reported that she had suffered more than 20 stab wounds, making survival highly unlikely. Jason had 8 wounds from the attacker. Although only 1 was critical, he received medical attention, and his life was no longer in danger. Meanwhile, the detectives began investigating the crime scene. They discovered blood in the hallway, indicating that Johnny had attempted to seek help from her neighbors, but none of them had opened their doors. Next to Johnny's room, the detectives found the murder weapon, a kitchen knife that belonged to Jason, which the attacker had used with such force that it became bent and damaged. The police discovered blood near the back door of the apartment and on the stairs leading to the street. As Jason and Johnny had exited through the front door, detectives believed the killer likely escaped through the back door in Jason's room. Another clue was found, a partial footprint, possibly left by the attacker when they followed Jason and attacked him. The brutal nature of Johnny's murder led police to suspect a personal motive. Initial investigations focused on Johnny's boyfriend, despite him being approximately 1,000 kilometers away from Knoxville. However, friends and family testified to their wonderful relationship, and he had no apparent reason to commit such a heinous crime. He learned of Johnny's death when her mother called him at 10 a.m. and claimed to have fainted and taken a long time to recover. In his incapacitated state, he required a neighbor's assistance to book a plane ticket and pack his suitcase. After carefully verifying his alibi, investigators concluded he couldn't have physically traveled to Knoxville and back by morning, thus ruling him out as a suspect and shifting their attention to Jonia's neighbor. In contrast to Jonia's boyfriend, who had a solid alibi, this particular neighbor did not, which raised suspicions that he might be the perpetrator. Many friends and family members of Jonia suspected him, with some believing he could be the killer, and others accusing him of leaving Jonia behind as he fled the apartment. The suspicion was so deep-seated that Jonia's parents didn't even want him to attend her funeral. After Jason was released from the hospital, investigators started questioning him. He maintained his original story, stating that he had heard screams, seen an unfamiliar man, and was attacked after successfully fighting off the attacker. Jason rushed to the front door, went out into the street, and sought help from the neighbors. He thought Jonia had also escaped from the apartment because he could no longer hear her screams. However, the police had doubts about the truth of this testimony. Doubts about Jason initially stemmed from his injuries. Although he had 8 wounds, 7 were superficial, and the 8th on his right arm could have been sustained while either defending himself or attacking someone. Furthermore, the absence of forced entry into the apartment suggested that the assailant might have already been inside. Jason claimed to have taken out the trash through the back door that night, but he couldn't recall whether he had locked it. The detectives pressed him further, focusing on which door he used to exit the apartment onto the street. Jason maintained that he had left through the front door, but the police suspected he was lying. If Jason had actually exited through the back door, it would account for the bloodstains near the door leading to the stairs, thereby heightening suspicions against him. Additionally, the police accused him of using and selling illegal drugs and of becoming aggressive when he couldn't get his fix. Jason denied all these allegations, but the investigators continued to level various charges against him. After spending several hours at the police station, the detectives asked Jason to take a polygraph test, and to their surprise, he accepted. An expert was brought in to administer the test, during which Jason was asked a series of leading questions. When the test was over, the investigators told him that he had failed, suggesting that his responses were false. This news caused Jason to become extremely upset, shouting that he was innocent and had no involvement in the crime, that his life was in danger, and that the real perpetrator was still at large. Despite his protests, the detectives remained skeptical. Police couldn't charge Jason due to lack of evidence. Lab analysis of the murder weapon revealed 3 DNA samples: the victim's, Jason's, and an unknown man's. The unknown DNA was also found elsewhere in the apartment. A bloody fingerprint on the knife handle didn't match Jason's. These findings suggested another person was present, but the unknown DNA didn't match any in the database. Despite this, public opinion still doubted Jason's innocence. Jason developed PTSD after a flawed polygraph test led to false accusations. In reality, Jason had severe lung and neck injuries with little hope of recovery. However, due to police report inaccuracies, his treatment was only 25% covered, leaving him in financial distress. After the police stopped suspecting him, they started questioning Jason as a witness. Based on his account, they managed to create a rough description of the attacker. However, the situation was complicated by the fact that Jason didn't get a clear look at the assailant's face. The apartment was dimly lit, and the attacker had pounced on him as soon as he left the room. In Jonia's room, the investigators made an intriguing discovery. A cap was found near the back staircase, along with discs and a stereo player. At first, they thought these items might belong to Jonia or Jason, but Jason denied any connection to them, claiming they were not in his apartment. This led the investigators to suspect that the killer might have left them behind. The police released a rough sketch of the suspect to the media, and after it was published, they received hundreds of leads. Many people reported individuals who vaguely matched the sketch, prompting the detectives to investigate each of these leads. One lead in particular caught their attention: a group of local teenagers known to break into houses to steal. One of these teenagers, 19-year-old Michael, bore a resemblance to the suspect's sketch. The police launched a search for Michael, which was made more complicated by the fact that he was already wanted for theft. With the possibility of his involvement in murder, 2 police units joined the search for Michael. They tracked down Michael and brought him in for questioning about the murder. As soon as he was in custody, the investigators turned their attention to his shoes, which had a tread pattern that was similar to the footprint found at the crime scene. They took DNA and fingerprint samples from Michael and sent them to the lab for analysis. While waiting for the results, they questioned him, and he made a surprising confession. Michael claimed that he and a friend had broken into Gia's apartment that night, intending to steal valuables. However, he said his friend had taken a knife and attacked Gia. But the detectives soon grew suspicious of Michael's story. The details he provided didn't match the evidence they had collected, and there was no sign of 2 strangers at the crime scene. The lab results only added to their doubts. Michael's DNA and fingerprints didn't match those found at the murder scene, and his shoes didn't match the tread pattern found in Gia's room. In the end, the police concluded that Michael had made up the whole story. It may seem strange, but it's not uncommon for people to falsely confess to high-profile crimes, often to get attention or a reward. It's unclear what motivated Michael, but his confession turned out to be completely false. Following the murder, investigators questioned over 1,000 potential suspects and collected around 400 DNA samples. However, none of them matched the evidence found at the crime scene. In an effort to encourage people to come forward with information, a reward was offered early on in the investigation. As time went on, the reward amount increased each month. By December 2005, a year after the murder, the reward had reached $60,000. The state governor also contributed an additional $20,000 from his own funds, drawing even more public attention to the case. Despite the many leads, all of them ultimately led to dead ends. As a result, the case remained unsolved for several years. In 2007, the victims' parents took action seeking changes in state legislation. They found it surprising that the murderer's fingerprints and DNA were not in any databases, considering the brutality of the crime. The parents refused to believe that this was the perpetrator's first offense. They later discovered that, according to Tennessee laws, fingerprints and DNA samples were only collected from people who had been convicted of a crime. Jason's parents were determined to bring about change. They took an active role in shaping a new law that required the collection of DNA samples from all individuals arrested for violent crimes. The authorities backed this initiative, and the law was passed in May 2007. 2 months later, a significant breakthrough occurred in the case. The police arrested 22-year-old Taylor Lee Olson for violating his probation terms. Olson had a lengthy criminal record, mainly involving theft, check forgery, and auto theft, with multiple previous arrests. Remarkably, despite his history of run-ins with the law, his fingerprints and DNA had never been collected. Olson lived with his girlfriend and their newborn daughter, but his criminal activities persisted. It was revealed that Olson had already come to the investigators' attention 5 months earlier when they received a tip about his possible involvement in the murder. However, for reasons unknown, the police had not pursued DNA samples for analysis at that time. Nevertheless, with his new arrest for probation violation, they finally decided to question him about Jonia's case. Olson eventually confessed his involvement in the murder and willingly provided a DNA sample. When the lab results came in, it was confirmed that Taylor's DNA was a complete match with the sample found in the victim's apartment. Following this, they collected his fingerprints, which also matched the fingerprint on the murder weapon. Olson was subsequently arrested, and detectives began to question him. Initially, Olson said he was not guilty, but he eventually decided to confess to his actions. Taylor claimed that on that night he had intended to steal Jonia's car and had entered her apartment through the back door to find the car keys. When he entered her room, she woke up and began screaming. In response, Olson grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her multiple times. However, he insisted that he hadn't intended to kill anyone and that it had all occurred accidentally. Detectives had doubts about the truthfulness of some details and leaned towards believing that Taylor had premeditated the murder. It was possible that he had been stalking the victim for some time, indirectly supported by the fact that Jonia's friends had reported someone following her in a car at the time. No evidence was found to substantiate this, but after Olson's arrest, it seemed increasingly plausible. Despite this, there was little doubt about his culpability, as his DNA and fingerprints were present on the murder weapon, strongly indicating his involvement. Olson's trial was slated to commence in mid-2008, and by that point, he had already retained a lawyer. Apparently, his legal counsel advised him to retract his confession, and Taylor presented a new version of events to the detectives. Now, he claimed that he had entered Jonia's apartment with his friend named Noah Cox. According to this revised account, when Olson entered Gia's room to retrieve the car keys, she allegedly woke up, seized a knife, and stabbed him several times. Olson then fled through the back door, while his friend entered Gia's room, disarmed her, and killed her. This new narrative raised suspicions among the police, as they found no fingerprints or DNA from other individuals at the crime scene, making it appear unlikely that anyone else was involved. Detectives awaited the start of the trial, but it never occurred. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olson took his own life in his prison cell. Alongside him, several suicide notes were discovered, addressed to his family, Joan, his relatives, and the police. In the note to the detectives, he once again alleged that his friend Noah Cox was the actual perpetrator and also apologized to Gia's family and his own. Detectives continued to believe that Olson was responsible for the murder and repeatedly questioned him, but they found no evidence implicating him. Gia's parents also remained skeptical, believing that Olson was lying. In their view, if Taylor was truly innocent, he wouldn't have taken his own life. It seemed more likely that he simply did not want to spend the rest of his life in prison. Furthermore, for several months following his initial confession, Olson had consistently maintained that he had entered the apartment alone and that there was no one else with him. The sudden change in his story to shift blame onto his friend raised further doubts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The incredible case of Michelle Whitaker. Michelle Laurel Whitaker was born on August 16, 1969, as the fourth of 5 children to her parents. According to her mom, Laura Andrews, Michelle was extremely close to her entire family. However, this changed when they moved from Illinois to Gastonia, North Carolina. And Michelle's once happy demeanor began to fade. As she entered her teenage years, Michelle and her mom began to clash frequently, primarily due to her mom's strictness. After graduating from high school, Michelle got married, but the union lasted less than a year. Her inexperience and youth made it difficult for her to handle the problems her partner created. The abusive treatment by her husband marked the beginning of a prolonged and distressing period in Michelle's life. Those close to her believe this tumultuous period led to her later struggles. At the time, she struggled to cope and made poor choices as a result. After her divorce, Michelle's family moved to Spartanburg, South Carolina. By the time she was 30, Michelle was struggling with alcohol addiction and had already had 3 failed marriages. She was working part-time as a waitress and was barely getting by. One evening in 1999, Michelle met a man named David after her shift ended, and he offered to give her a ride home. Michelle accepted, but soon regretted her decision. Instead of taking her home, David took her to a secluded area where he assaulted her and forced her into intimate contact. He was arrested a year later, pleaded guilty to assault and battery, and received an 8-year prison sentence. Just before she disappeared, Michelle was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. Michelle's parents decided it was time to take drastic measures. They contacted the police and asked them to hold Michelle in custody until a spot in a rehabilitation center became available. Although it was a difficult decision, her parents felt it was the only way to help Michelle in her situation. However, Michelle became extremely upset by this, and from that point on, her relationship with her mother significantly deteriorated. Unfortunately, Michelle was mistakenly released from jail without receiving the court-ordered treatment for her substance and alcohol abuse. On August 5, 2002, Michelle had an argument with her mother and stormed out of the house in a bad mood. 3 days later, the man she was staying with contacted her mother, Laura Andrews, to inform her that he couldn't find Michelle after they had had an argument. This is how Laura learned of her daughter's disappearance. Laura immediately sought help from a friend who worked at the local police station. But the police, familiar with Michelle's lifestyle, advised her to wait a little longer, assuring her that Michelle would likely show up on her own. However, 2 weeks passed and Michelle failed to return home. On August 21, 2002, Laura filed an official missing persons report, and local law enforcement began investigating Michelle Whitaker's disappearance. During their investigation, they discovered the last place Michelle was spotted, a truck stop. This information came from a local resident named Doug, who had met Michelle by chance on the street the day before she disappeared. Doug recounted that he had stopped his motorcycle outside a bar where Michelle was sitting and struck up a conversation with her. Michelle told him that she had had a fight with her boyfriend and he had thrown her out of the house. Later that evening, they visited 2 bars together, playing a few games of billiards at one of them. They then took a ride on Doug's motorcycle until dawn, after which they went to his house. Thus, it was revealed that Michelle Whitaker had spent her last evening visiting local bars, and Doug was the last person to have seen her alive. This made Doug the prime suspect in Michelle's disappearance. According to his testimony, Michelle had planned to go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, a resort city on the Atlantic coast, where she hoped to earn good money working in local bars and restaurants. Doug claimed that he dropped Michelle off at a truck stop, but only after giving her some clothes, including a t-shirt and shorts, and some money to buy coffee and newspapers. He said he wished her good luck before leaving. To verify Doug's story, the police gave him a lie detector test, which he passed. They also tested the man Michelle had been staying with before she vanished, but found no evidence to suggest he was involved in her disappearance. The police began to consider the possibility that Michelle had actually gone to Myrtle Beach, which is approximately 250 miles from Spartanburg. A few more weeks went by, but there was still no sign of Michelle. Her family and friends were growing increasingly anxious. Despite her anger and resentment towards her parents, they couldn't bring themselves to believe she would abandon her family and go into hiding. Michelle's prolonged disappearance made the local sheriff question her motives. When people travel for extended periods, they typically take some personal belongings with them, but Michelle had left with almost nothing. Moreover, she had a beloved pet dog to which she was deeply attached. Every detective interviewed agreed that Michelle would never willingly abandon her dog. In the meantime, Michelle's parents began driving around the neighborhood, hoping to find any clue that might lead them to their daughter. After receiving multiple tips that Michelle had been spotted on a beach in North Carolina, they headed there immediately. They spent 3 days searching for her, posting flyers and talking to locals, but their efforts ultimately proved fruitless. After 6 months of unsuccessful searches, Laura Andrews started questioning whether her behavior towards her daughter had been right. She had witnessed her daughter's downward spiral and couldn't just stand by. Laura wanted to protect her in any way possible. Additionally, she suspected that the 1999 brutal attack Michelle suffered might have contributed to her disappearance. Laura couldn't forgive herself for the hurtful words she spoke to Michelle after the attack, despite the assault being a terrible act by a stranger. Laura initially blamed Michelle for taking a destructive path and causing harm to herself, which only damaged Michelle's self-esteem further with her words. From the sheriff's office, it was assumed Michelle had motives to escape due to her reputation. Detectives thought she'd eventually be arrested, but a year passed with no results. The police were alarmed that Michelle left no digital traces, which wasn't a good sign. Both police and family wondered if Michelle was a crime victim, possibly falling prey to a truck driver, but this theory remained unsubstantiated. 2 more years passed with no leads. On the 3rd anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, after police and Laura Andrews visited the truck stop where Michelle was last seen, local TV stations revisited the story. Just days after Michelle's story aired on TV news, the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office received a strange letter. The anonymous letter, handwritten on a small sheet of paper, claimed to reveal the location of Michelle Whitaker's body. A crude, homemade map accompanied the letter, pinpointing the exact spot. Despite its amateurish appearance, the letter was well written and proper, lending it an air of credibility. The sheriff, accompanied by search dogs, embarked on a search of a rural area 25 miles from where Michelle was last seen. This development came 3 years after her disappearance, and her family was torn between despair and hope. Some had reluctantly accepted that Michelle might be dead, while others clung to the possibility that she was alive and safe. The search dogs were unable to detect any scent, and the operation was eventually called off. Although relieved that no body was found, the investigators remained perplexed by the letter. A handwriting analysis and DNA evidence from the envelope suggested that the author was a woman, but her identity remained unknown. In 2006, Michelle's parents relocated to Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is 65 miles from Spartanburg. A year later, on the 5th anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, the whole family gathered at the church. Michelle's mother, Laura Andrews, did not want to treat the gathering as a memorial service because Michelle's body had not been found, and there was still a faint hope that she might be alive. Another year passed, and Detective William Gary took over the investigation of Michelle's disappearance. At the time, he was handling a dozen unsolved cases, including Michelle's. Since many years had gone by without any evidence that Michelle was still alive, her case was considered a felony. The lack of evidence led the investigators to believe that something tragic had likely occurred. As the 6th anniversary of Michelle's disappearance approached, on August 4, 2008, Detective Gary received a call from a woman claiming to know Michelle's whereabouts. She said Michelle was living in Oregon. The woman had seen Michelle's file on an episode of Forensic Files and a website created by Laura, which helped her recognize Michelle as a woman who had been living with friends for 6 years, unaware that her family had been searching for her. After receiving the mysterious message, the investigators were understandably cautious. Detective William Gary, for evidence, requested that the woman send a photo of Michelle. He then showed the picture to Detective Wood, who had previously worked on the case and immediately recognized her. Promptly, an Oregon State police officer was dispatched to the address in question to confirm Michelle's identity. In a remarkable coincidence, on August 5, 2008, exactly 6 years after Michelle's argument with her mother and her departure from home, Detective Laura Andrews received a call informing her that her daughter had been found alive. Laura struggled to process the news, and only after hanging up the phone did a flood of questions arise. Where is she? How is she? And what had she been doing all this time? Although the news was welcome, a family reunion was not possible at this point. The police were bound to respect Michelle's privacy and could not disclose her whereabouts to her parents. It was up to Michelle to initiate contact with her family. The detectives tried to persuade Michelle to talk to her relatives, if only to alleviate their concerns. The next evening, Michelle phoned her mother. 2 weeks later, at Atlanta Airport, Michelle and her family had a long overdue reunion. She confessed that she was exhausted from her former way of life. After her argument with her mom, Michelle came to a realization. She believed her family would be better off without her around. Initially, when Doug dropped her off at the truck stop, Michelle had planned to head to Myrtle Beach to find work. But instead, she hitchhiked and ended up in Las Vegas, then California, and eventually Oregon. Michelle offered apologies to both her family and the police, who had invested considerable time and resources into searching for her over the past 6 years. She had been living under her real name, and it never occurred to her that anyone was still looking for her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ada Betty Quadros Fernandez. Ada Quadros was born on September 13, 1977, in the coastal town of Chimote, Peru, to Victor Quadros, a veterinarian, and El Fernandez, a teacher. As the eldest of 4 siblings, Ada consistently excelled academically, winning knowledge contests and enjoying a happy childhood. Growing up, Ada spent a lot of time with one of her sisters on their grandparents' farm, developing a strong connection with nature and animals. This period was one of the happiest times of her life. Ada's family was middle class, not poor, but not wealthy either. During her teenage years, she sought ways to contribute financially, forming an entertainment group with her sister and a friend to perform at children's parties. After high school, Ada enrolled in a private university to study law. But unfortunately, her family's financial situation made it impossible for her to continue, and she was forced to drop out. Despite this setback, Ada was determined to succeed and support her family. With the goal of building a better life in mind, Ada applied for a US visa through the lottery program. Like many young people from Peru and Latin American countries, Ada viewed the United States as a land of unlimited opportunities. She was determined to migrate, work hard, earn a better income, and create a brighter future for herself and her family. Her family was overjoyed for her and sold some of their belongings to gather enough money for her journey. Her initial destination was Texas, where she planned to stay with some relatives. In early 2004, Ada started working as a waitress at a restaurant. Later, she found employment with a company that placed nannies in households, which is how she met the Lazarchuk family. The family consisted of Michael, commonly known as Mike, his wife Renee, and their 3 children, Elisa, and twin boys Ryan and Kyle. Little is known about the family's background, except that Mike and Renee got married in 2000, and shortly after, Renee became pregnant with their first child, Elisa. 4 months after Elisa's birth, Renee was expecting again, this time with twins Kyle and Ryan. The Lazarchuk couple was searching for a reliable nanny to care for their twins when Renee returned to work. Since Elisa was already settled in a daycare where she attended daily and had made friends, they decided to keep her there. After interviewing several candidates, they found Ada to be the most suitable. At 27, Ada was young yet mature, appearing healthy, strong, well-mannered, and cheerful. Renee wanted Ada to start right away so she could spend a few weeks showing her the household routines, explaining where everything was, and outlining her expectations. This would also give Renee the opportunity to observe how Ada interacted with the young twins, who were just over a year old. The family had one non-negotiable condition. They required a commitment from Ada to stay with them for at least 18 months, which she agreed to. Initially, the agreement was that Ada would only spend her days at the Lazarchuk household. But later on, they asked her to move in full-time, and she accepted. As a result, she only went back to her uncle's house on weekends. Everything seemed to be going well, and the Lazarchuk family was more than satisfied with Ada's work and had grown to trust her completely. They had many happy memories, captured in photos, of Ada smiling and caring for the twins. However, the Lazarchik family's situation took a dramatic turn in the summer of 2005. Ada broke the news to them that her uncles were returning to Peru and then moving to Germany, and she intended to go with them, having already bought her plane ticket for October 29th. This was a blow to the couple, as it was not what they had originally agreed upon. Eventually, they came to terms with it and only asked Ada to stay on until they could find a suitable replacement. They even asked for her help in finding and selecting her successor, and Ada agreed to assist them. After Ada stopped sleeping over at the Lazarchiks, she would go back to her uncle's house every night and return early the next morning. With her departure approaching, the Lazarchiks arranged to meet several potential nannies on Wednesday, October 12th. During the day, Renee asked Ada to prepare macaroni and cheese for the children, which Ada did. After feeding the kids, Ada waited for Renee's return. When Renee got back home, she greeted her children, making sure they were doing fine. After conducting some interviews, she spent over an hour with her kids before putting them to bed. Everything appeared normal. However, at exactly 5 a.m. on Thursday, October 13th, Kyle woke up crying, which was unusual since the twins were heavy sleepers who never woke up on their own. Renee got up, went to their room, comforted Kyle until he fell asleep again, and then returned to bed. At 7:30, 2 hours later, Mike entered the children's room, roused them from sleep, gave them a hug and a kiss, and left them in Ada's care before departing for work. Just before 9:30, Renee awoke, spent time with the twins, changed Ryan's diaper, bid farewell to both Ryan and Kyle, and then headed to work. Throughout this period, the children were doing fine, with the only unusual occurrence being Kyle's early awakening that day. Elisa, their older sister, went to daycare as usual, but around 1 p.m., Ada's 911 call marked a dramatic turn of events. In a highly agitated state, Ada reported that Kyle, one of the children, had stopped breathing and was turning blue. After providing the address, the operator guided Ada through performing CPR on Kyle while paramedics rushed to the scene. Minutes later, paramedics arrived and took charge of Kyle's care. They questioned Ada, who was very distressed about what had happened. Ada explained that after lunch, she had put Kyle to bed in his crib and left to fetch his brother Ryan. When she returned with Ryan, Kyle suddenly began vomiting and stopped breathing. While paramedics treated Kyle, Ada phoned Renee to update her on the situation, providing a modified account of what had happened. According to Ada, after feeding the children, she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor, as was her usual practice, before going to fetch his brother. However, when she returned, she found Kyle vomiting. She went to the kitchen to grab a bowl to contain the vomit, and upon her return, she discovered that Kyle had fallen. Ada claimed she picked him up, took him to the sink, and performed the breathing rescue technique Renee had taught her, but it didn't work. She also attempted CPR. Following initial treatment, the paramedics rushed Kyle to the nearest hospital. By the time Renee arrived at the house, the ambulance carrying her son had already departed, but the police remained on the scene. Renee took Ryan, the other twin, and asked Ada to accompany them. They followed the police, who escorted them to the hospital. During the drive, Renee called her husband and they met at the medical center. Shortly after, the doctors decided to airlift Kyle to the Dallas Children's Hospital via helicopter. The Lazarchiks returned home, leaving Ada to care for Ryan, before heading to the Dallas Children's Hospital. Ada requested they keep her updated about Kyle's condition. Renee worried Ada might be too nervous to care for Ryan, so she called a friend to help at the house. Her friend arrived to find Ada upset, tearful, and concerned about Kyle's fall. Ada explained that Kyle suddenly fell, and she tried to revive him with CPR. She repeatedly expressed her love for Kyle, insisting she'd never harm him. At the Dallas Children's Hospital, the Lazarchik family received devastating news about Kyle's condition. The doctor in charge reported that Kyle had suffered severe head injuries, including multiple bruises on his head, arm, and left shoulder. A neurosurgeon explained to Mike and Renee that urgent action was needed to relieve the pressure on Kyle's brain, but sadly, his survival was unlikely. A child abuse specialist also met with the parents and suggested that Kyle's injuries were consistent with abuse. The specialist emphasized that the injuries were extremely severe, equivalent to those sustained in a severe car accident or a fall from a 6th-floor height. Renee was stunned when she heard the news. At first, she suspected that Ada might have accidentally dropped the child or was too scared or ashamed to admit it. But the doctors clearly explained the severity of Kyle's head injuries, which required a significant amount of force to inflict. This made an accident seem highly unlikely. Renee quickly arranged for another friend to pick up her son, Brian, and take him away from the house. While this was happening at the hospital, Ada became increasingly agitated at home, repeatedly calling Renee's friend to ask about Kyle's condition. When Renee's friend stepped out to pick up her son from school, Ada called her multiple times, inquiring about Kyle. However, when Renee's friend returned to the house, Ada appeared calm, no longer crying or talking. Just then, a police car drove by the house. Upon seeing it, Ada became hysterical, crying uncontrollably and shouting, "No, no, no." She collapsed behind a door, repeatedly insisting that she would never harm Kyle. 2 female detectives arrived to question Ada, as she was the only adult present when the incident occurred, and had called 911 to report the injured child. As the detectives arrived at the house, they heard Ada's cries and got out of their patrol car. Inside, they found Ada extremely agitated. Once she calmed down, she explained that she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor to help him burp after a meal. When Kyle started vomiting, Ada went to the kitchen to get a container to catch the vomit, as Renee disliked stains on the floor. While she was away, Kyle turned blue, fell, and started convulsing. Ada claimed she then took him to the living room, called 911, and followed the dispatcher's instructions. During the interview, the other officer called the hospital to get an update on Kyle's condition. Upon learning the diagnosis, the detectives told Ada that her story didn't add up, given Kyle's injuries. Ada suggested that Kyle might have hit his head when he fell on the playroom floor after she left him alone, but the officers noted that the floor was covered with soft rugs, making this explanation unlikely. Ada then proposed that Kyle might have hit his head on the doorframe when she carried him on her hip. At the officer's request, Ada demonstrated how this could have happened, adding that Mike and Renee often bumped Kyle's head without any issues. The officer checked the spot where Ada claimed Kyle hit his head, but found no signs of a strong impact. When Ada was questioned by the officers, she claimed the injury to her son Kyle was a result of a strong impact when she was running with him in her arms. She denied ever shaking or hitting him or his twin. However, the officers remained skeptical, as the injury seemed inconsistent with Ada's story. They urged her to come clean, explaining that the truth could be crucial in saving Kyle's life. Despite their pleas, Ada refused to provide any further explanation. The officers reported the situation to their command and took Ada into custody for further questioning. Meanwhile, crime scene investigators arrived to process the house. After completing their work, they gave Renee's friend, who was staying at the house, the all clear to clean and organize the property in preparation for the family's return. As Renee's friend and several others cleaned the house, they stumbled upon a piece of adhesive tape sticking out from a cabinet door under the kitchen island. When they opened the door, they noticed it was broken and held together by tape, causing it to become misaligned. They simply resecured it with the tape, but found it odd, as Renee was always meticulous about fixing broken items to prevent her children from getting hurt. Their curiosity piqued. They decided to report the discovery to the police. Shortly after, investigators returned to the scene to collect potential evidence. Later, when questioned about the cabinet door, Renee stated that she frequently used that door and had never seen it being held shut with adhesive tape before. By Friday, October 14th, All of Mike and Renee's hopes had been dashed. The doctors informed them that Kyle was clinically brain dead and had no chance of recovery. Amidst overwhelming grief and indescribable pain, the couple made the difficult decision to authorize the removal of life support. After which, Kyle sadly passed away 3 days later, on October 17th. The detectives questioned Ada, who was in prison on suspicion of premeditated assault on a minor. Ada claimed that on the day before the incident, she was preparing macaroni and cheese at Renee's request. According to Ada, Kyle was sitting on the kitchen counter, fell off, and hit his head hard on the kitchen floor. She picked him up, checked for injuries, and found only redness on his ear and the right side of his head. Ada applied cold compressors and gave him a pain reliever. When asked why she hadn't shared this with the other officers, Ada said she thought they wouldn't believe her. She didn't tell Renee because Renee had a severe headache when she got home from work and requested the lights be turned off and the house be kept quiet due to her migraines. The detectives asked if Ada had fallen with the child, which she strongly denied. During the interrogation, Ada discovered that Kyle had died and broke down in tears for the rest of the interview. The judge charged Ada with aggravated homicide and set bail at $715, an amount neither Ada nor her family could afford, so she remained in custody until the trial. The police hinted that they might charge her with premeditated actions, which could carry the death penalty. The 2005 trial of Kyle's death case heard testimony from the doctor who examined Kyle at Dallas Children's Hospital. The doctor reported that when Kyle arrived, he was already unconscious. Multiple bruises were found on the right side of his head, as well as on the left side of his head, shoulder, and both arms. 2 small hemorrhages forming hematomas were also discovered on the right temple. The doctor identified 3 main areas of hematomas on Kyle's head, indicating 3 separate impacts. The bruises were relatively recent, with one possibly 12 to 16 hours old. Internally, Kyle suffered from brain and retinal bleeding, consistent with severe trauma, and despite no broken bones, his brain tissue was significantly swollen, with an increased head pressure of 90 millimeters of mercury, far exceeding the normal 20 millimeters. Based on these findings, the doctor concluded that Kyle's injuries were consistent with severe blunt force trauma, likely caused by hitting his head against a hard object. The doctor suggested that such injuries could result from violently shaking and swinging a young child's head against a solid object, such as a kitchen cabinet door. A forensic expert from Dallas County testified about the autopsy results, which revealed multiple overlapping small bruises on Kyle's scalp, as well as a couple of small scrapes on his right temple, spaced over a centimeter apart. The autopsy also showed 4 or 5 pairs of similar injuries on his head. The brain had suffered significant bleeding and swelling, with bleeding in the retinas of both eyes, indicating that a substantial amount of force was required to cause such injuries. The expert concluded that Kyle's death was a result of severe head injuries caused by blunt force trauma, and agreed that it was possible that Kyle's head had been struck multiple times against the wooden door of the kitchen cabinet. The expert discounted the possibility that Kyle's injuries were caused by simply bumping into a door frame or falling from the kitchen counter. A forensic analyst provided crucial testimony, measuring the distance between the fasteners on the broken kitchen cabinet door and finding it consistent with the punctate abrasions on Kyle's head. This expert also examined the adhesive tape used to repair the cabinet door, uncovering 2 DNA traces. One of these traces had a significantly higher contribution and matched A's DNA, while the lesser trace remained unidentified. Next, Mike took the stand to testify. He recalled that Kyle was unharmed on the night of October 12th and the morning of October 13th, displaying no bruises. Mike explained that he had prepared breakfast that morning, opening and closing the kitchen cabinet doors to retrieve utensils and food, and verified that all doors were in perfect condition at the time, including the one that was later mysteriously repaired with tape. The parents shared that they had breakfast with the children and engaged in playful activities with the twins, who were crawling around a playhouse. Based on all the evidence, it's clear that Ada was the only adult in the house when the events leading to Kyle's death occurred. While the exact circumstances may never be known for certain, the prosecutor presented a possible scenario at trial. Kyle might have refused to eat his lunch, prompting Ada, who was distracted by watching a soap opera, to remove him from his high chair without noticing the open cabinet door. The prosecutor suggested that Ada's frustration or anger may have led her to attack Kyle's head with the cabinet door, which ultimately broke, leaving screw marks on the child. After all the testimonies and closing arguments, the jury went to deliberate. Upon returning, they found Quadros guilty of capital murder of a child under 6 years old. As the verdict was read, Ada's mother, Elle Fernandez, who had traveled from Peru when her daughter was arrested, stood up and shouted that she would free because she was innocent. She proclaimed that there was no evidence to convict her daughter and vowed to start over an appeal. Kyle's parents shared photos and videos of their 14-month-old son, recounting his life from birth to days before his death. Family members spoke, while others cried. Sentenced to life without parole in 2006, Ada's family refused to give up, citing racial prejudice and poor defense. They sought appeal funding from Peru, U.S. communities, and solidarity groups. In prison, Ada consistently proclaimed her innocence and seized every opportunity to reiterate it in interviews. Her persistence eventually paid off when, in 2009, her lawyers filed an appeal, highlighting 5 specific mistakes made during the initial trial. The appeals court reviewed the case and dismissed 3 of the claims, but upheld 2. This was sufficient for the judges to quash the conviction and declare the trial null and void due to irregularities. In the aftermath of this ruling, Ada's family launched a new fundraising campaign to raise the $100,000 required to cover the costs of a new trial. It took 3 more years to prepare for the new trial, which finally began on July 10, 2012. The jury selection process started with over 100 candidates, and eventually, 12 jurors were chosen. The trial was held at Collin County's Justice Hall. The defense team argued that Kyle's head injury occurred on October 12th, when he fell from the kitchen counter. They claimed that the situation worsened the following day, when Ada accidentally hit Kyle's head on the door frame while carrying him in her arms. This time around, the defense presented a new piece of evidence. Testimony from a forensic expert with 40 years of experience. The expert suggested that some of Kyle's bruises might have been caused during his hospital stay, specifically when doctors inserted a catheter to assess brain swelling. However, the prosecution strongly disputed this new testimony. Additionally, David Gardner, an employee of the kitchen cabinet manufacturer, testified for the defense. He proposed alternative explanations for the broken cabinet door, although he didn't entirely rule out the possibility that Kyle's head could have been struck against it. A pivotal moment in the trial came when Mike took the stand, recounting the heartbreaking final 2 days of Kyle's life. Mike described how Kyle was hooked up to multiple tubes and machines, and ultimately being removed from life support, with his parents by his side as he passed away. The defense team insisted that there wasn't sufficient evidence to convict Ada, but the prosecution countered by emphasizing the medical findings and the numerous inconsistencies in Ada's story. Following the conclusion of the trial, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, even requesting to review the 911 call recordings once more. In the end, they delivered a verdict. Ada Quadros, aged 33 at the time, was guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In prison, Ada occupied herself by joining the volleyball team, learning Braille, and entering an art competition in which she won with a portrait of the Virgin Mary. She sold her winning artwork to raise money for a new appeal. Despite being behind bars, Ada remains adamant that she is innocent, and her spirit remains unbroken. From her cell, she and her family persist in their efforts to secure an appeal, hoping to prove what they believe to be the truth. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shannon Manny. Shannon Manny was born on April 6, 1997, to Anshumani and Vijay Manny. When she was a small child, her parents immigrated to the United States from Fiji. The family settled in Waukesha, a small town in southeastern Wisconsin, where Shannon grew up and attended school. She was intelligent, attractive, and very outgoing. Her parents believed Waukesha was the perfect place to raise their children. After completing high school in 2015, Shannon enrolled at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. She was passionate about helping others and aspired to become a social worker. Despite her busy schedule, Shannon worked with her father at an organic food company. It was at work that she met Quentin Neal, 26, who was applying for a similar position. Quentin had a strong desire to make a positive impact on people's lives. Shannon shared a similar passion, dreaming of building a shelter for women and children, while Quentin wanted to create a safe haven for his community. With their similar interests and outlook on life, Shannon and Quentin quickly formed a close bond. As their friendship blossomed into romance, Shannon was overjoyed to have met Quentin, and soon they started living together. Quentin showed genuine care for Shannon, and she ensured their relationship remained happy. They began making plans for their future together. However, their lives took a drastic turn when Shannon vanished without a trace. On April 13, 2018, Shannon failed to pick up her younger brother from school and didn't show up to work. Her phone was switched off, and she hadn't informed anyone about her absence from work. Concerned, her parents went to the police station, unable to locate their daughter. Initially, detectives suspected that Shannon, being young, might have run away or gone off with friends. But her parents disagreed, knowing their daughter well. She wasn't the type to simply switch off her phone and abandon her family, leaving them worried and searching for her. Shannon's mother shared crucial details with investigators, prompting them to take the case more seriously. Shannon was 4 months pregnant when she vanished, which raised concerns since pregnant women rarely disappear without something bad happening to them. Furthermore, some of her belongings, including money and important documents, were still in her room, which was another alarming indication. Shannon's parents told investigators that the father of her child was 27-year-old Quentin Neal. However, when Quentin was contacted by phone, he claimed to have no knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts. According to Quentin, Shannon had been living with her parents, and he hadn't seen her at all that day. The investigators called Quentin again, asking him to come to the police station to answer some questions. Quentin appeared anxious, promising to arrive at the station immediately. When Shannon's parents were still present, Quentin told the investigators that the last time he had seen her was over 24 hours ago, when she left his house to pick up her little brother from school. They had only exchanged a few text messages since then, and had not been in contact again. The investigators asked Quentin if he had any idea where Shannon might be, but he was unable to provide one. According to Quentin, Shannon's life revolved around school and work, and she had always been in touch with her loved ones until that day. However, Quentin recalled that there was another guy who had shown interest in Shannon. Despite knowing she was in a relationship and pregnant, this guy had relentlessly pursued Shannon's affection, even after she asked him to leave her alone. The investigators instantly considered this guy a person of possible concern, as jealousy often leads to reckless behavior. The next day, police began questioning Shannon's friends to gather new information. They distributed details of the search for the young pregnant woman to all police stations in Wisconsin the same day. The first disturbing discovery was made. Shannon's car was found in Milwaukee, about 20 minutes from her home. Forensic experts carefully examined the vehicle inside and out, but found no suspicious signs. There was no evidence of carjacking, struggle, or any other crime. However, Shannon's purse and cell phone were missing from the car. 3 sets of fingerprints were found on the vehicle, including Shannon's and Quentin's. The origin of the 3rd set remained unknown, and the police had to identify the person who left them. That same afternoon, the man mentioned by Quentin was questioned by investigators. Although he claimed to be upset about Shannon's disappearance, he denied Quentin's allegations, stating that he and Shannon were just friends and that he had never pursued a romantic relationship with her. When pressed further, he admitted to confessing his love to Shannon in the past, but she had rejected him, saying they could only be friends. Since then, he had not attempted to win her affection. The guy's fingerprints were found to match those in Shannon's car. However, he explained that he often got rides from Shannon to university, which is why his prints were in her car. He also claimed to have been 100 miles away from Waukesha, attending a baseball game when Shannon went missing. The investigators checked and confirmed his alibi, ruling him out as a suspect. The case got a surprising and crucial break when Shannon's mother, Anshumani, found her daughter's Apple Watch and checked her recent text messages. She took the watch to the police station, handing it over to investigators. Reviewing Shannon's texts, they made a significant discovery. Despite Quentin's claim that he hadn't met Shannon on the day she vanished, the texts showed they had arranged to meet up that day. This meant Quentin had lied to the investigators and Shannon's parents, making him the prime suspect. While examining Shannon's watch messages, investigators uncovered cracks in her relationship with Quentin. They found texts revealing Quentin's abusive behavior towards the pregnant mother. This revelation shocked Shannon, who had been unaware of her lover's true nature. Quentin apologized profusely, begging her not to leave him. Shannon proposed they take a break from each other. The investigators' suspicions grew, fueled by Quentin's troubled past. He had a criminal record, having recently been released from prison after serving time for robbery. He had multiple arrests for assault and other misdemeanors. Shannon's parents had also grown wary of Quentin, noticing their daughter's persistent depression. Moreover, Quentin exhibited emotional instability regarding the unborn baby, further solidifying the investigators' doubts about his character. After Shannon informed her parents about her pregnancy, they arranged a meeting with Quentin, during which he assured them that he would take care of both Shannon and the baby, claiming he had always wanted to have children. However, a few days later, according to Anshumani, Quentin sent Shannon some disturbing texts, contradicting his earlier promise and stating that he didn't want the baby. He even suggested that Shannon should consider having an abortion. The police attempted to track Shannon's cell phone and discovered it was last active in the afternoon of April 13th, near Quentin's residence. Shannon's mother noticed severe bruising on her arms and inquired about the cause. Shannon broke down in tears and revealed that Quentin had physically assaulted her, punching her with his fists while she was in her vehicle. Despite her parents' warnings to end the relationship, Shannon eventually forgave Quentin and resumed dating him. With this concerning information, investigators grew increasingly worried that they might not find Shannon alive, prompting them to obtain a search warrant and rush to Quentin's house. At first, the crime scene did not appear to show any signs of a struggle or disturbance. The area was clean, with no broken furniture or objects. Forensic experts sprayed the first floor with luminol, a chemical that detects blood, but found no evidence. However, when they applied the same test to the basement, the walls and floor glowed, indicating the presence of blood. The numerous marks found at the scene strongly suggested that Shannon was likely no longer alive. Quentin Neal was arrested and taken into custody. Before questioning him, investigators reviewed the contents of his phone and discovered that he had recently searched online for ways to remove evidence of a crime using a lye chemical. This suggested that he was planning to hide traces of his crime. During the interrogation, Quentin initially denied any knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts and claimed to have no connection to her disappearance. However, Faced with solid evidence, he began to alter his story. Eventually, he agreed to confess to everything. Quentin claimed to have acted in self-defense when he took Shannon's life. He told investigators that Shannon had visited his house to discuss their future and their child. But the conversation escalated into an argument. According to Quentin, Shannon then entered the kitchen, grabbed a knife and a gun that were being kept for emergencies, and began threatening him. Quentin said he felt compelled to act quickly to protect himself, leading to a physical struggle that ended in Shannon's death. Quentin reiterated to the investigators that he had acted in self-defense, but they were skeptical due to the lack of defensive wounds on his body. Despite their doubts, they continued to listen to his account. Quentin said that, realizing the gravity of his actions, he panicked in the basement where the incident occurred. In an attempt to conceal the evidence, he used a large suitcase to hide the body. Quentin Neal led the police to a storage unit 6 miles from his home, where he had stashed a suitcase containing Shannon's body. When detectives opened the suitcase, they found Shannon's lifeless body, her wrists and ankles bound with duct tape, contradicting Quentin's claim of self-defense. Forensic examination revealed Shannon died from 2 gunshot wounds to the head and had additional knife wounds on her body. Shannon's parents were devastated when detectives informed them of the discovery of their daughter's body on April 18, 2018. Quentin Neal was subsequently indicted for the murders of Shannon Manny and her unborn child. The evidence gathered, including their correspondence from the day of her death, was sufficient for the court to reach a guilty verdict. The dispute had begun when Shannon visited Quentin's home to discuss her pregnancy, but she never left his house alive. The trial of Quentin Neal, accused of killing Shannon, was set to begin in the spring of 2019. However, just days before the trial, anonymous letters were sent to attorneys and court officials, claiming that someone else was responsible for Shannon's death. The letters were later deemed irrelevant after the author, a friend of Quentin's, was identified and found to be trying to confuse the investigation and help Quentin. Quentin faced the death penalty, but denied the charges and claimed he acted self-defense. 15 months had passed since Shannon's death, and her family waited anxiously for justice, trying to stay positive. Shannon's mother, Anne Shamani, worked hard to keep her daughter's memory alive and not lose hope. Shannon had been passionate about supporting women and children affected by domestic violence, and her family had planned to build a shelter in her honor. However, that dream was never realized, as Shannon herself became a victim of violence. On July 15, 2019, Quentin Neal reached a plea deal with investigators, admitting guilt in the deaths of Shannon and her child. As part of the deal, prosecutors dropped the death penalty. 2 days later, on July 17, 2019, the Milwaukee County Circuit Court sentenced the 28-year-old to 2 concurrent life sentences without parole eligibility, ensuring he will spend the rest of his life in prison. At his sentencing, Neal remained silent, failing to explain his motive for the crime. Shannon's mother, Anne Shamani, expressed relief that justice had been served, noting that the only silver lining was that Neal would no longer harm anyone else. The family plans to keep Shannon's memory alive by opening a shelter in her honor. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jolene Cummings. The disappearance of 33-year-old Jolene Cummings shocked even seasoned detectives. Jolene, a mother of 3, lived in Fernandina Beach and was going through a divorce from her husband Jason. While Jolene and their children resided in a Fernandina Beach house, Jason moved to a neighboring city and had weekend visitations with the kids. Jolene worked as a hairdresser at Tangle's Hair Salon. On Saturday, May 12, 2018, Jolene worked until 5 p.m. The next day, Mother's Day, was also her 34th birthday. Her children had spent the previous days with their father. As agreed, Jolene was to meet Jason on Sunday in Hilliard at the Winn-Dixie supermarket parking lot to pick up the children. Jason brought the kids, but Jolene failed to appear. All attempts to reach her by phone were unsuccessful. Her mother, Ann Johnson, who wanted to wish Jolene a happy birthday, couldn't contact her either, as all calls went straight to voicemail. After trying to reach Jolene to no avail, Jason contacted Ann to inquire about the children. Upon learning that Jolene hadn't picked up the kids, Ann grew concerned, as this behavior was unusual for her daughter. When Ann couldn't get in touch with Jolene on Monday, May 14th, she filed a missing person report with the police. The authorities promptly launched an investigation, releasing a poster with Jolene's photo and issuing an all-points bulletin for her 2006 Ford Expedition. Ann Johnson made a public plea for help in finding her daughter, urging anyone with information to come forward. Jolene's disappearance was devastating for Ann, and she begged anyone with knowledge to report it. On the same day, police and volunteers searched the forest near Jolene's home, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The salon where Jolene worked was closed on Sunday and Monday. The police discovered that Jolene was last seen on Saturday, May 12th, when she left work. According to the salon's owner, Jolene and Jennifer, another hairdresser, were scheduled to work together that day. In a phone call, Jennifer told her boss that she and Jolene closed the salon at 5 p.m. and each drove away in their own cars. The police determined that Jolene last used her phone to make an outgoing call while still at work on May 12th. Nassau County Sheriff Bill Leeper appealed to anyone who was a customer of Tangle's salon or in the area on May 12th to contact the police. Jolene's relatives and friends didn't think she was hiding on her own accord. The owner of the salon, where Jolene had worked for 6 years, shared their skepticism. It was hard for them to believe that she would abandon her children. The police were determined to uncover at least one lead, so they delved into Jolene's personal life. As spouses often become hostile during divorce and child custody disputes, they took a closer look at Jason. Meanwhile, detectives found that just 5 days before Jolene vanished, a neighbor had reported a loud argument to the police. It emerged that Jolene had been fighting with her ex-boyfriend, Jason G., and their children were witnesses to the altercation. He had asked Jolene if he could stay with her for a while, but she refused. Enraged, he began vandalizing everything in sight. The reason for her refusal was that the police were actively searching for Jason due to his parole violations. By the time the police arrived, Jason had managed to flee the scene. After Jolene disappeared, Jason G. became a person of interest in the police investigation. 2 days into the investigation, on May 15, 2018, the police found Jason G. hiding in Jolene's house, where he had been since the day Jolene's neighbor reported a loud quarrel to the police. He was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. During the conversation, Jason G. claimed he was not involved in Jolene's disappearance. Meanwhile, the police discovered their first crucial lead. They found Jolene Cummings's SUV parked outside a Home Depot hardware store, just a few miles from her workplace. The vehicle was undamaged and showed no signs of a struggle. On May 15th, the police visited the salon where Jolene worked, as it was the first working day after a 2-day break. They arrived at 10 a.m. to speak with Jennifer Seibert, an employee who claimed to be the last person to see Jolene and to have closed the salon with her before the weekend. However, Jennifer failed to show up for work, citing an urgent matter in another city. CCTV footage provided crucial clues about Jolene's disappearance. The footage revealed Jolene's car entering the parking lot of a hardware store, where the police later found it. Notably, Jennifer Seibert had stated that she and Jolene closed the salon at 5 p.m. on May 12th. But the CCTV footage showed Jolene's car arriving at the hardware store at 1:17 a.m. on May 13th, a time gap of 8 hours and 17 minutes. Jennifer visited a gas station across the street from her location. Surveillance footage from the station reveals that she entered the premises, purchased a bottle of water, and requested an employee to call a taxi for her, which later took her to her workplace, a salon. The gas station employee reported to the police that Jennifer appeared agitated and had fresh facial abrasions. As a result, Jennifer Seibert became the primary suspect in the investigation, and the police launched a search for her. Upon verifying the address she provided when applying for her job, the detectives discovered it was fictitious. Jennifer attempted to evade capture, but her efforts were unsuccessful. On May 16th, patrol officers spotted a black Kia Soul belonging to Jennifer, parked in a recreation area between two trucks, approximately 50 meters from her salon. Upon approaching the vehicle, the officers found Jennifer asleep inside. They arrested her and initially charged her with stealing Jolene Cummings's car. When the police took her to the station, detectives noticed the abrasions on her hands and face and asked her to explain how she got them. She said she had been bitten by bedbugs. The police found out that she didn't have a permanent place to live, mostly sleeping in her car and using a shower at a fitness center. After her arrest, the investigators made a surprising discovery. Jennifer Seibert wasn't her real name. Her real name was Kimberly Kessler, born in 1968, and she had been reported missing in Pennsylvania in 2012. The name Jennifer Marie Seibert belonged to a 13-year-old girl who died in a car accident in Germany in 1987 and was buried in Butler Cemetery, Pennsylvania. During a videotaped interview 48 hours later, Kimberly Kessler, seated on a couch and wearing an orange jumpsuit, calmly revealed her true identity. "When you run my fingerprints, they'll come up as Kimberly Lee Kessler. I'm 50 years old, and I've been on the run for over 25 years." The police investigation into the case revealed more about Kimberly Kessler's past. It emerged that she had begun using other people's names in 1996 while living in Pennsylvania. Since then, Kessler had used at least 18 aliases and lived in 33 cities across 14 states. Many of these names were similar, and she had taken at least half of them from gravestones and cemeteries, later obtaining fake documents to support these identities. One of the identities she used was Jennifer Seibert. In 2012, Connie Kessler, Kimberly's mother, contacted the police to report her daughter missing, despite not having heard from her since 2004. This delay in reporting her daughter's disappearance, 8 years after losing contact, suggests that the family relationships were strained. The Pennsylvania police investigated Kimberly Kessler's disappearance and determined that she was voluntarily missing, but the reasoning behind this conclusion is unclear. It is unknown whether a further investigation was conducted. Had the police found her, they likely would have discovered that she had assumed someone else's identity. Several questions remain unanswered. Why did Kessler flee, and why did she use multiple aliases? According to Connie Kessler, her daughter faced numerous challenges, including an abusive relationship with a man in 2004. Kimberly gave birth to a son, Evan, but when the relationship ended, the father took custody and prohibited Kimberly from seeing her child. The father later relocated to another state and falsely told Kimberly that their 1-year-old son had passed away. Kimberly sought to uncover the truth and locate the grave of her son. Frustrated by the lack of answers, she began searching for Evan and investigating his fate. Connie Kessler theorizes that her daughter used aliases to conceal her identity, fearing Evan's father. According to Tim Edwards, Evan's father, the circumstances were different. He claims to have had a relationship with Melissa McKernan between 1997 and 1999, resulting in the birth of their son Evan. Melissa allegedly used fake names to keep her family, including her mother, from finding her. After the couple separated, Melissa retained custody of Evan, denying Tim visitation rights. In 1999, when Evan was around 15 months old, social services intervened, taking Evan away from Melissa, who then fled the city, disappearing from Tim's life. Tim never informed Kimberly that Evan had passed away since he lost contact with Melissa after she left, and never heard from her again. Later, when Jolene vanished, Evan was 20 years old and had never seen a picture of his biological mother. until FBI agents visited their home in 2018 to gather information about Kimberly Kessler's past. However, there are inconsistencies in these stories. According to Tim Edwards' birth certificate, Evan was born in 1998, but in her interview, Connie Kessler claimed Kimberly gave birth to Evan in 2004. This discrepancy suggests that Connie Kessler was not well informed about her daughter's life, and her statement about Tim hiding Evan from his mother may not be reliable. As a result, Connie's theory that her daughter used the identities of deceased individuals to find her son and avoid detection by his father is questionable. Moreover, Kimberly was unable to provide coherent reasons to the detectives about why she needed to use multiple names. Now, let's revisit the Jolene Cummings case. After uncovering the fact that Kimberly Kessler had been living under assumed identities, the police brought forgery charges against her. A storage unit rented by Kessler was searched, yielding several significant finds, including 4 wigs, a bag containing 2 severed hair tails, and 3 mobile phones. However, the most critical piece of evidence was the discovery of Jolene Cummings's DNA on Kessler's sock and shoe. Furthermore, during a search of Kessler's vehicle, the police found scissors with Jolene's DNA on them. Notably, the blue plastic containers found at the scene will prove to be important later on. The phone seized from Kessler revealed a disturbing search history. It suggested that what happened to Jolene Cummings was not an accident, but rather something Kessler had been preparing for. On April 30th, 2018, at 3:36 a.m., Kessler searched for information on a man who was charged with murder after his co-worker's remains were found in his yard. This was followed by a search on May 8th at 1:37 a.m. for cases where a co-worker was found guilty of murder, but the body was never found. Later that day, at 7:13 a.m., Kessler searched for advice on injecting and how to use a tourniquet. She also looked up a list of female murderers by country on a website called Murderpedia, as well as a list of female murderers in Florida. Finally, she searched for information on autopsy and post-mortem changes at 6:33 p.m. The owner of the hair salon where Jolene worked reported that the plant in the pot inside the salon had been replaced. This draws attention to Kessler's search queries on May 13th, the day Jolene failed to pick up her kids. At 12:05 p.m., Kessler searched for indoor palm and then variation palm tree. A minute later, at 12:06 p.m., the police examined CCTV footage from a hypermarket selling household goods, located a few hundred yards from the Tangles hair salon. The footage showed Kessler arriving at the hypermarket on May 14th at 2:39 p.m. and leaving the store half an hour later with a plant, which would later end up at the hair salon on May 15th at 6:13 p.m. 2 days later, on May 16th at 6:27 p.m., Kessler searched online for Jolene Cummings' "I have vanished" and "No body, no crime." Forensic experts used luminol and ultraviolet light to investigate the hair salon, and their findings suggested that a serious crime had taken place there. The entire room glowed under the ultraviolet light, indicating the presence of blood or other bodily fluids. On May 22nd, the sheriff held a press conference, during which he announced, "We have gathered sufficient evidence, although some of it will remain undisclosed for the time being to protect the ongoing investigation. Sadly, our evidence leads us to conclude that Jolene Cummings has likely died." The investigators learned that, about a week before her disappearance, Jolene shared her suspicions with a colleague at the Tangle salon. She thought their new hairdresser, Jennifer, was hiding something and wasn't being genuine. According to some salon clients, the relationship between Jolene and Jennifer was strained. One client even witnessed a heated argument between the two women on May 9th, just 3 days before Jolene vanished. The Tangle hair salon closed its doors on June 5th, 2018. Despite Kessler's attorneys managing to keep some evidence under wraps, the police released information sheds light on what happened to Jolene Cummings. However, a surveillance camera near the back of the building captured footage of the dumpster. Kessler was seen there at least 4 times. The recording shows Kessler doing something near the dumpster. Later, at 8:08 a.m., she returns to dispose of a white garbage bag. Based on how she lifts the bag, it appears to be quite heavy. 14 minutes later, she throws out another white bag. In the fourth recording, taken an hour before midnight, Kessler is seen lifting a waste container to empty its contents, suggesting that it holds something heavy. The Walmart camera footage provides insight into what Kessler threw away. The recording shows her purchasing items at the self-checkout, including garbage bags, cleaning agents, latex gloves, and notably, an electric knife. This discovery significantly impacted the police's subsequent actions. In July 2018, investigators discovered that a local waste management company had been dumping trash in a Georgia landfill. A team of nearly 200 people combed through the landfill for a week, yielding several crucial leads, although the sheriff refused to disclose them to protect the integrity of the investigation. Near the dumpster, where Kessler had discarded the white garbage bags, police recovered a piece of jewelry, women's shoes, and a blue plastic container. Notably, the container was identical to one found in Kessler's storage unit, and it tested positive for Jolene Cummings's DNA. While Jolene's body remained unfound, the accumulated evidence was sufficient to warrant Kessler's arrest for her murder. On January 17, 2019, Kimberly Kessler made her first court appearance, entering a not guilty plea. However, the trial was delayed for several years due to the judge's concerns about Kessler's mental stability. During this time, Kessler engaged in a hunger strike, which left her weighing under 88 pounds. Her court appearances were often marked by outbursts of anger. Before the 2021 court session, Kessler underwent compulsory treatment, which ultimately deemed her fit to stand trial. On December 9, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and on January 27, 2022, Kessler was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The prosecution believes Kessler's motive was to silence Jolene Cummings, who threatened to expose her lies during a press conference. Sheriff Leeper expressed satisfaction with the verdict, stating that Kessler would spend the rest of her life in Florida State Prison. Unfortunately, Jolene Cummings' body was never found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Rhonda Casto. Stephen and Rhonda, both 23, embarked on a hike along the Eagle Creek Trail. Before they started, Rhonda took a photo of Stephen with her cell phone and jokingly texted her mother, saying he might either propose to her or push her off a cliff. The weather was lovely as they continued their walk. However, Stephen later reported that Rhonda's behavior became strange. She asked him what he would do if something happened to her, and if he would care for their daughter. He reassured her that he would. As the weather started to deteriorate, Stephen suggested they head back, but Rhonda did not turn back. Instead, she wrapped a towel around her shoulders and began running down the narrow, slippery path. Stephen alleged that Rhonda lost her footing and fell about 150 feet down the Eagle Creek Trail. After her fall, Stephen claimed he hiked down to the ravine where she landed, but he had no cell service. He tried to call 911 but couldn't get through, so he left her behind, holding her body until he had to leave. Stephen says he hiked to the trailhead, where he finally reached emergency services for help. Later that day, rescuers retrieved Rhonda's body. However, Rhonda's family reported that Stephen showed no emotional response during her memorial service. Stephen disputes this, claiming he was overwhelmed with grief and continuously crying, but often withdraws from others when deeply upset. Following Rhonda's death, Stephen quickly gathered his and his daughter's belongings and relocated to the other side of Oregon to be closer to his own family. This sudden move raised suspicions among Rhonda's family, who began questioning what had transpired between the couple in the moments leading up to Rhonda's death. In 2006, Stephen moved from the United States to China with his young daughter. This bold move marked a fresh start for both of them. Having previously lived in China during his first marriage, Stephen was drawn to the country and its people. He chose to settle in Wuvi, a city about 75 miles outside of Shanghai. Stephen's decision to teach English to Chinese business people proved to be a great opportunity. His daughter, too, quickly adapted to her new life in China, becoming fluent in Mandarin within just 2 months. Both Stephen and his daughter thrived in their new surroundings. During his time in China, Stephen met and fell in love with Landy Yin Yan. Landy formed a strong bond with his daughter, Man, taking on a motherly role that brought them closer together. Stephen was deeply grateful for Landy's influence in his daughter's life. After a year of dating, Stephen proposed to Landy, and she happily accepted. In February 2015, Stephen and his daughter returned to the United States, where the couple planned to get married. Stephen and his fiancée planned to hold 2 wedding ceremonies, one in America and one in China, to include their families and friends from both countries. Stephen and his daughter arrived in the United States a day before his fiancée, flying into San Francisco to catch a connecting flight to Oregon. As they exited the plane, an officer approached Stephen, telling him they needed to detain him due to an issue with his luggage. The police soon arrived, taking Stephen into custody and separating him from his daughter. What Stephen didn't know was that, during his time in China, detectives had been working tirelessly to investigate Rhonda's death. The suspicious circumstances surrounding her fatal fall from Eagle Creek had led them to continue their inquiry, ultimately concluding that Stephen was responsible for her death. Rhonda's mother played a crucial role in keeping the investigation into her daughter's murder open, regularly contacting detectives for updates. Eventually, the police arrested Stephen at an airport for Rhonda's murder and extradited him to Oregon. When questioned, Stephen claimed he thought he was dreaming and hoped to wake up at home in China with his girlfriend Landy. Unfortunately, his nightmare was reality. Initially, Stephen's bail was set at $2 million, and he spent 14 months in jail awaiting trial. However, the judge later reduced his bail to $250,000, which his attorney secured, and Stephen was released with an ankle monitor. Rhonda's family was overjoyed to learn of Stephen's arrest, knowing justice was finally being served. The arrest brought relief and comfort to Rhonda's loved ones, who had been grieving her loss for years. Stephen's attorney then conducted experiments at Eagle Creek Trail, where Rhonda died, to argue in court that her death was an accidental slip rather than a push by Stephen. The Eagle Creek Trail, where Rhonda fell to her death, is one of the most popular hiking spots in the Columbia River Gorge, known for its breathtaking beauty. During Stephen's preliminary hearings, the medical examiner who performed Rhonda's autopsy revealed a crucial piece of evidence. All of Rhonda's injuries were below the waist. This finding was key to Stephen's defense, as it suggested that Rhonda might have taken her own life. The defense team argued that Rhonda's injuries, including her broken pelvis, were consistent with a feet-first fall, rather than a head-over-heels tumble, which would indicate that she was pushed. Additionally, they presented notes from Rhonda's therapy sessions, which showed that she was depressed, but never expressed suicidal thoughts. Rhonda had previously stated that her relationship with Stephen was unloving. The defense team used this, along with her history of depression, to suggest that Rhonda might have intentionally taken her own life. By presenting this evidence, they hoped to discredit the prosecution's claim that Stephen had pushed Rhonda, resulting in the injuries that ultimately led to her death. Stephen made a claim that Rhonda had suffered from depression and had attempted suicide multiple times before they met, but Rhonda's family disputed this and accused Stephen of lying. They suggested that Stephen was trying to shift the blame onto Rhonda for her death, to distract from his own role in her murder. Stephen also stated that Rhonda had struggled with drug addiction since she was 12, claiming that she had experimented with various substances. However, the medical examiner's report only found slight traces of marijuana and the prescription medication Rhonda was taking for anxiety and depression, which she had been experiencing due to postpartum depression. During the preliminary hearings for Rhonda's murder, disturbing evidence came to light, implicating Stephen in her death. It was revealed that Stephen had been in a romantic relationship with Rhonda's 16-year-old sister, Melanie, despite being in his 30s. This discovery raised serious concerns, given the significant age gap between Stephen and the underage Melanie. The prosecution argued that Stephen's inappropriate relationship with Melanie, his girlfriend Rhonda's sister, could have been a motive for Rhonda's murder. Rhonda had discovered her husband's infidelity, leading to tension and a possible reason to kill her. After Stephen was arrested for Rhonda's murder, he was also charged with multiple counts of sexual assault and sodomy related to his relationship with Melanie. Before his murder trial, in 2005, Stephen pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sexual abuse, admitting to having sexual intercourse with Melanie twice. However, he later claimed that he was forced into making this admission and that it was false. Stephen said he only pleaded guilty because it would allow him to fight for custody of his daughter, and he was desperate to get her back. In contrast, the state alleged that the relationship between Stephen and Melanie lasted for over 4 years. Stephen eventually admitted to having a sexual relationship with Melanie, Rhonda's teenage sister. Rhonda sent a text message to her teenage sister Melanie, expressing her negative feelings towards Stephen. In the message, Rhonda called Stephen a piece of garbage and accused him of using Melanie to hurt her. This suggests that Rhonda was aware of Stephen's manipulative behavior, which her mother confirmed. According to Rhonda's mother, Rhonda loved Melanie and wanted to repair their relationship, which had likely been damaged by Stephen's actions. Evidence presented in court revealed that Stephen's relationship with Rhonda was not as perfect as he claimed. Additionally, the court learned of Stephen's disturbing past, including a deviant sexual history. Specifically, it was revealed that only 6 months after the death of his daughter Rhonda's mother, Stephen was arrested and charged with 5 counts of sexual abuse for allegedly touching a 13-year-old girl. Stephen denied the allegations against him, but later confessed to sending inappropriate text messages and a photo to the victim, admitting his actions were wrong and pleading guilty to sexual harassment. In court, evidence presented included photos of Rhonda's bruised back, taken by herself. Rhonda's friend testified that she had overheard arguments between Rhonda and Stephen when they were on the phone. Additionally, Stephen's ex-wife testified that he had previously attempted to harm her. Despite denying the allegations, Stephen was not charged in China. Rhonda's family, however, remains convinced that Stephen was responsible for her death, believing he was motivated by a life insurance policy he had taken out on her, which he had recently increased. Her mother shared her concerns, revealing that Stephen had suffered significant financial losses from day trading the previous year and was struggling financially. Additionally, those who knew Rhonda well can confirm that she adored her 9-month-old daughter, and it's unthinkable that she would have ended her own life by jumping from Eagle Creek in May 2017. Rhonda's family was stunned to learn that the state had reached a settlement with the defense, resulting in Stephen pleading guilty to criminally negligent homicide, a lesser charge than murder. Despite believing that Stephen had murdered Rhonda, the state's case was weak due to a lack of physical evidence proving he had pushed her from the Eagle Creek Trail. Stephen received credit for time served while awaiting trial, but was required to remain on parole for 3 years. After his release, Rhonda's family and friends felt that justice had not been served, believing Stephen should have faced harsher consequences for his actions. At Stephen's sentencing hearing, Rhonda's sister delivered an emotional impact statement, condemning Stephen for destroying their family and causing immense pain and sorrow. Rhonda's mother also spoke, expressing her bewilderment and frustration, saying that Stephen's actions had shattered their family and left them heartbroken. Stephen said he didn't push Rhonda, but took a deal because he was running out of time to regain custody of his daughter. He claimed he was willing to accept the consequences for his actions to protect his child. However, Rhonda's family and friends didn't believe him. In a 2018 interview, Stephen made a shocking claim about Rhonda's death. He said that when he found her on Eagle Creek Trail, she was still alive. The interviewer asked if Stephen had ended Rhonda's life to spare her further suffering. Stephen responded by asking a hypothetical question: if you shoot a suffering fellow soldier to end their pain, is that murder? He suggested that in some cases, such an act could be seen as justified, although still a form of homicide. While Stephen never directly admitted to harming Rhonda, his comments hinted at the possibility of his involvement in her death. Rhonda's mother applied for Social Security survivor benefits in 2017 on behalf of Rhonda's infant daughter. She claimed the child lived with her and promised to use the funds solely for the baby's care. However, the state accused her of fraud, alleging that between 2010 and 2014, the child actually lived with her father, Stephen, not with Rhonda's mother as claimed. The state charged Rhonda's mother with stealing nearly $40,000 in government funds over 5 years. Her defense team argued that she was trying to prevent Stephen from gaining custody of his daughter and accessing a $1 million life insurance policy he had taken out on Rhonda's life. The defense also highlighted Rhonda's mother's struggle with depression, which worsened after Rhonda's death. They claim that she used marijuana to cope with her grief, which impaired her judgment and clouded her thinking. Rhonda's 53-year-old mother was sentenced to a month in a halfway house and 3 years of probation for stealing government funds. She had pleaded guilty to the crime and was also ordered to repay the $39,100 she stole. Rhonda and Stephen's daughter was placed in foster care in October 2015, after the Department of Human Services took custody of her. This happened because Stephen pleaded guilty to sexually abusing a 13-year-old girl, which led an Oregon court to terminate his parental rights. However, Stephen is appealing this decision. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shanae Brooke Edwards. Shanae Brooke Edwards was born in 1989 in Warrnambool, Australia. Shanae grew up with her parents and older brother Tyson. Although her early life and upbringing are not well documented, her loved ones remembered her as an adventure seeker who loved nature, hiking, motorcycling, and animals. She was a kind-hearted, genuine person who formed deep, sincere connections with others, showing generosity, patience, love, and kindness to everyone she met. In 2019, Shanae traveled to Georgia, a country that had long fascinated her with its natural beauty, rich history, and landmarks. Her boyfriend, Mauri El Sayed, a Lebanese national, had planned to join her in Georgia, but was unable to do so because the country's borders were closed to unvaccinated individuals at the time. Shanae resided in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, where she worked as an English teacher. This allowed her to support herself financially while exploring the country and visiting new destinations. She formed close bonds with like-minded friends who shared her passion for travel. On July 29, 2021, Shanae uploaded a photo to her social media profile, captioning it with the single word, joy. The image was taken during a scenic motorcycle ride, an activity she thoroughly enjoyed. The following day, July 30, 2021, Shanae decided to hike up Matatsminda, a popular tourist attraction situated in the heart of Tbilisi. According to her friends, Shanae would often take leisurely strolls in the wooded area near the mountain, and she had never encountered any issues or threats to her personal safety. On July 30, 2021, Shanae left her residence around 3:30 p.m. and was last spotted near the Church of St. Michael of Tavare, located at the foot of Mount Matatsminda, which serves as a starting point for hikers. Shanae was scheduled to meet friends at a cafe in the capital city, but she failed to appear. When attempts to reach her by phone proved unsuccessful, her friends decided to file a missing persons report with the local authorities. Meanwhile, a friend of Shanae's living in California grew concerned and placed a call to Shanae's phone. When the call was answered, Shanae could be heard screaming, "Please let me go, okay?" "Just let me go," indicating that she was being attacked and desperately seeking release. The call was abruptly disconnected, and when Shanae's friend tried to call back, there was no answer. There are conflicting accounts of what Shanae's friend in California did next. According to some reports, she posted an urgent message to a Facebook group comprised of expats living in Georgia, asking someone to alert the police to the disturbing phone call. Other sources claim that Shanae's friend directly contacted the Georgian police and relayed the distressing details. It is certain that within hours of Shanae making a frightening phone call, Georgian police became aware of it and began to investigate. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers were deployed to search the area, focusing on the slopes of Mount Matatsminda. The search party utilized search dogs and drones, but Shanae remained missing. By sunset, her phone was still off, and she had not visited any local hospitals. This lack of progress was ominous, as was confirmed the following day. Tragically, on July 31st, after an extensive search, 31-year-old Shanae Brooke Edwards was discovered deceased near a hiking trail. The perpetrator attempted to conceal evidence by hiding the body under tree branches and leaves. A knife, believed to be the crime weapon, was found nearby. Shanae's phone was soon discovered on the mountainside. Further inspection of the crime scene revealed an old, rusty shovel, a fireplace, used needles, and numerous empty bottles. Georgia's Interior Minister revealed to local media that the police have uncovered information not yet disclosed to the public to protect the integrity of the investigation. He assured that the ministry and police officers are doing everything possible to find the perpetrator. The forensic examination of Shanae's body revealed 13 stab wounds, with 5 in the neck area, leading the police to conclude that the perpetrator undoubtedly intended to kill the young woman. Signs of strangulation were also found on her neck. After the authorities officially confirmed Shanae's death, the media reported that the crime was motivated by lust, but the Georgian police denied this, citing the forensic medical examiner's failure to find any signs of a crime against the woman's integrity. Shanae's boyfriend, Moody El-Sayed, has vowed to track down the culprit, no matter how long it takes, and exact revenge. Shanae's death was a devastating blow to her friends, and a particularly traumatic experience for her family, who lived on another continent. They faced the difficult task of transporting her body back home, while the police worked to identify the perpetrator. Although the police are directly responsible for preventing crimes and capturing criminals, in this case, there was an added concern. Georgia's billion-dollar tourism industry could be severely impacted by the fact that a tourist had lost her life in the capital city, a popular tourist destination. The police conducted an extensive investigation, interviewing over 200 people, including Shanae's friends, co-workers, neighbors, and employees and visitors of Matatsminda Park. They examined the roots of the case and reviewed video footage of Shanae's movements on the day she went missing. In an expat Facebook group, a local woman reported hearing a woman screaming on the trails below Matatsminda Park around an hour after Shanae left home. Another woman in the same group claimed to have witnessed a disturbing scene on the mountain the day before Shanae went missing, in which a man was seen aggressively assaulting a woman in the same area where the crime eventually took place. At the same time, the laboratory analyzed the crime weapon and discovered a male DNA sample, but no matches were found in the Georgian police database. Consequently, the samples were sent to the databases of 194 Interpol member states for further checking. Witness interviews revealed that Shanae had no enemies, no history of conflict with anyone, and no association with individuals of questionable character, suggesting she may have been a random victim of a crime with an unclear motive. The police conducted a meticulous investigation, collecting genetic samples from several dozen individuals who could potentially have been involved in the crime, and subjected each to rigorous scrutiny. Following a thorough and multifaceted investigation, authorities were able to narrow down the list of suspects until they found a DNA match. 40 days after Shanae Brooke Edwards' death, the Georgia police released a statement announcing the arrest of a 33-year-old man, Rafael Marsokolov, a Georgian citizen born in 1988. The evidence gathered during the investigation, including testimony, surveillance footage, genetic tests, and other proof, led to his arrest on September 8. Marsokolov's lawyer stated that his client denies all charges, including robbery and the murder of Shanae Brooke Edwards, and has pleaded not guilty. The lawyer claimed that Marsokolov was not involved in the case and has chosen to exercise his right to remain silent. After Marsokolov's identity was made public, his image was broadcast on television. A woman from the Georgian capital took to Facebook to share a post revealing that her friend had been attacked by two men on Mount Matatsmunda a few months prior. And although the police were aware of the perpetrators' identities, the case was closed. She suggested that if the police had done their job properly, the Australian girl might still be alive. Additionally, Marsokolov's own Facebook page revealed that he was an activist for the ruling Georgian Dream Party. On September 10, 2021, the Tbilisi court denied Marsokolov's request to be released on bail while awaiting trial, instead keeping him in custody. The police had obtained strong physical evidence, as well as damning testimony from Marsokolov's brother and wife, who revealed that Marsokolov had confessed to the crime at home. He warned them that if they told anyone about his involvement in Shanae Brooke Edwards' attack, their young child would face the same fate. In October 2021, the Edwards family wrote a heartfelt letter describing Shanae's personality and expressing gratitude to everyone who had supported them. They specifically thanked the government of Georgia for its financial assistance in repatriating Shanae's body and the Georgian people for their ongoing love, attention, and support during this difficult and tragic period. In February 2022, the first hearing on the case took place under Georgian law. Marsokolov faced a possible sentence of 16 to 20 years in prison. At the trial, he chose not to remain silent and pleaded guilty to robbery. However, he denied intentionally taking Shanae's life. The prosecutor disagreed, pointing out that the 13 stab wounds, including 5 to the neck, indicated Marsokolov's intent to kill the victim. After his knife broke, he even strangled Shanae. The defense claimed that Marsokolov has mental health issues and was in an abnormal state when the crime occurred. However, a psychological examination found him to be sane, allowing the court to impose a meaningful punishment based on the severity of the crime. The prosecutor noted that Marsokolov's blood tested positive for powerful drugs at the time of his arrest, but this did not diminish his guilt. Marsokolov admitted his guilt and apologized to Shanae Brooke Edwards' family in his final statement. According to the alleged motive, Marsokolov had intended to steal Shanae's iPhone 12, but his plan was foiled when she threw the phone into a ravine. Only 2 people knew what happened that day, and sadly, one of them is no longer alive to tell the tale. The prosecution requested a postponement of the sentencing, as the victim's brother, Tyson Edwards, wanted to attend the hearing. In a statement, Shanae Brooke Edwards' family urged the Georgian justice system to impose a life imprisonment sentence on Rafael Marsokolov, citing the tragic and devastating loss of their loved one, who left behind many grieving friends and family members. On March 9, 2022, a trial was held, at which Rafael Marsokolov was found guilty. Representing the family, Shanae's brother Tyson again requested that the defendant be given a life sentence. Marsokolov apologized to Tyson Edwards, claiming he was not that kind of person and had simply found himself in this situation. Ultimately, 33-year-old Rafael Marsokolov was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, the maximum penalty allowed under Georgian law.